Thank you so much for joining me here today. If you're new, I'm Amanda, and on this channel we talk a lot about bridging the gap between mental and physical health, and we are all about breaking the mental health stigma. For those of you that know my story, if you don't, you can check out a little bit more here. For those of you that know my story, you know that the one constant, the one positive coping mechanism I've had since I was 16 years old was Linkin Park and the life of Chester Bennington. From being sexually assaulted when I was 16 to when I was on that ledge of the Canadian hotel room in October of 2018, ready to take my life, ready to jump on the song break came on and convinced me to come down, convinced me to find my happiness, to find my healing. The music and the life of Chester was just really crucial, instrumental to my process. So imagine my excitement when I learned that his son, Jamie Bennington, has also started his own musical chapter, his own musical project. Released the album in September of 2020, and I thought it was amazing. It's something different. For me, it was just a breath of fresh air. But I'm so excited to have Jamie here today to talk with us about his grief from losing his dad, about his mental health struggles, our mental health picture as a society as a whole. And stay tuned to the end because we're going to have a rapid fire question session where we're going to get to learn a little bit more about Jamie. So Jamie, thank you so much for agreeing to come on today and talk to us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So I feel like this is our first time seeing each other face to face, and despite all these technical difficulties that we've had that have now bonded us, we didn't really know each other before this or anything, but I feel like we have this connection, because we shared this grief, and obviously in a very, very different way, but I know I didn't handle my grief well. When I lost my parents in my early 20s, when your dad passed away, I didn't handle this grief well. But I can't even imagine going through this grief when people are saying nasty things to you, nasty things about your dad, and it's everywhere, people are either bringing it up to you personally or in the news. How did you navigate your grief?
Oh, God. I didn't. For the first, I want to say 2 years, but I don't know. I did the math recently, and I guess my memory's even skewed on that because it's a lot, it melts your brain. But I believe it was almost a year before I actually started dealing with that stuff. Because honestly, I didn't know I was dealing. I was very much in the mindset of being upset with my father and being kind of like, not mad at him for having died by suicide, but, just being mad at him for the kind of relationship we had before he died. And I was just like, I don't care. And that's pretty much where I came from. I spent a year telling myself I didn't care. And then one day I was just overcome with this, revelation that I kind of did. I cared a lot and, still do. And, it was a really weird path because I actually got sick when he died. I had about 2 to 3 panic attacks a day. And I mean panic attacks, the kind that you're crying, but you're only crying because you're trying to roll yourself in a ball and your eyes are closed so tight, tears are coming out kind of shit. And I remember it being the worst when I was at the school library. I was doing this philosophy class, and every question, there was a question generator. It was just all of them were riddles about suicide for some reason. And I was just oh, I can't handle this. I put it away. I tried to be constructive and healthy. I walked outside and it was raining and I got mad because I couldn't ride my bike home. So I just went off to the side and laid down on the ground and just kind of just laid there until it was over. And I think that was the first time I was kind of oh, this is not, there's something off here, because if something really was okay, then I wouldn't be having these fits all the time. And about a month or so after that, I was, I would walk around at night because I wouldn't be able to sleep. So I just walk around the neighborhood and, blast music in my ears or listen to an audiobook or something. And I realized that's not healthy either. And then it just kind of occurred to me maybe I'm doing all of this to not pay attention to something. But also, not a lot of people, I'd had people in my life who were kind of I'm not talking about it at all. The best thing for me right now, because I have to be responsible, is not address it, not think about it, don't do anything until I get to a point where nobody needs me. which is impossible because you're in a family or you're in some kind of community or friend relationship of any sort. Like, you're always going to be needed on some level. And so I was never taught to acknowledge my feelings and be like, okay to process them even though things were going on. And that was the first time on my own I was like, that's bullshit. This obviously isn't right. I don't think people were born to be this way or meant to feel this way on purpose, or at least in this context. And that's when I started making a really big change in my life, and started kind of peeling a lot of things back, because that actually triggered me to an even greater realization that I probably have struggled with anxiety, panic, compulsion, ideation, depression, like all of these things, probably as long as I have been alive. And pretty much everybody I've ever known has been like, you're just having a bad day, or you're just being sensitive or something. And you're like sometimes, yeah, it's true. Like, maybe you are just being a little selfish or whatever, but then, then what is, at that point, 22 years of my life? It's just misunderstandings and not connecting. That's kind of weird. That seems impossible. So, I realized that, and that helped me with my grief a lot too, because I started to kind of peel back the layers, and I realized like my grief and depression and the grief was just kind of tacked on to this entire other thing that I had, because I wasn't trained to look at my feelings or see how I was actually operating. It was just tacked on to this bigger thing that I thought was grief for my father's death. So it's a really windy path.
It really is. There's no, straight path to grief. And by the way, guys, that is things not to say to people that are having any kind of mental health struggle 101. Do not say you're just having a bad day. Please don't minimize the feelings of other people when they're trying to verbalize their struggles. That is definitely not the way to help them open up to you, because once that person doesn't see you anymore as a safe source to go to share their feelings, it's just going to shut them off more. And that's not what we want to do when we're opening up this conversation about mental health. We want people to be able to come to us and share their feelings, so that way, number one, they know they have a safe place and outlet, but number two, so they can work on processing them. It's interesting because I actually developed my panic disorder right after my mom died too. I had my first panic attack after she died, and I thought I was dying. I thought I was having a heart attack. I'm like, somebody please call the hospital. I'm having a heart attack right now, and I thought I was dying. I think that it's actually kind of a fairly normal response to grief or traumatic emotions. But yeah, one of my biggest issues was that people had this expectation on, this is how you grieve, and this is how fast you grieve, and this is what it's supposed to look like. And then when you don't fit into that bubble, people judge you, and it's like, well, now you're just being a baby, grow up. Or again, back to the what not to say to people 101. People are going to cope in their own way and in their own time, and sometimes it's very hard. For my mom, she was everything in the world to me, and it was hard for me to get through that. So with the album Then, your new album that is available on Spotify and Apple Music, and I'm going to link that down below, guys. You really do need to check it out. It's awesome. It's just, like I said, such a new, refreshing sound. But you said that this was something just necessary for you to do, and it had a message that you felt needed to be said, a tone that you felt needed to be put out there. So when people do check that out and listen to it, what is the takeaway you want them to have?
I think dealing with your feelings, especially in something as strong as grief, is really interesting, because at least when you're losing a parent, you have a lot of I guess image problems. Because for example, this might be a surprise, but kids tend to look like their parents. And when my dad died, I was at the gym all the time. I spent most of my day there because I was trying to get the anxiety out. You only realize how much you act like somebody when they're gone, and everybody's reminding you. And we sound the same. We have probably the same laugh. I have some of the weirdest mannerisms that aren't even just me trying to emulate my father. They're just some weird genetic thing that just comes out, and it spooks everybody. And even the way we talk sometimes, which is probably more of a learned behavior than the physical tics, but it's just there's a lot. And I remember looking at myself and realizing I was dealing with this depression and all these things for so long that I didn't even know. And I remember looking in the mirror and being horrified, oh, I don't have a choice on the matter. Like, I'm going to die. You know, there's this kind of like struggle you have where you're like, is it hereditary or is it circumstantial? The depression he was feeling, and like, do I really have a choice? Cause he was doing the best he's ever done before he died. So it was like, well, I'm doing the best I've ever done. So now that I'm having panic attacks every day, you know, am I going to, you know, kick the bucket? And there was this kind of uncertainty for a while that led probably even more to the panic. But, that's when I started writing music, because I always wanted to, but with somebody like my dad, I specifically chose a career path adjacent, parallel, because I didn't want to be a rock star. I didn't want to have to deal with the pressure of like, which I do anyways, ironically, but you know, like living up to somebody else's career. And at that point, the best album in the world had come out. It's called Tranquility Base Hotel and Casino by the Arctic Monkeys. And I listened to it literally every day for a year. I did the math, and, probably twice a day for a year. And it kind of just like that. And I was in a Bowie phase. It just kind of was like these characters, Alex Turner and David Bowie, who are just like, I'm going to do me, and I'm going to focus on me, and I'm just going to be whatever I want to be. And I think out of that kind of came this newfound like security in writing music. And then in that, I was like, well, but what am I writing about? Because I'm not writing love songs, really. I'm not, I mean, on the album, there are a few that might come off that way, but they're not if you look at the lyrics. And I just started kind of digging into this idea that like things aren't exactly as perfect as people want them to be. And, so there are songs on the album that are just about like drug addiction and being neglected as a child, or like bad dreams that you have, or in my case, real premonitions, of people dying and then needing to act on those so they didn't, which is a true story, you know, like the toxic side of social media where, and one of the songs she used, The Hole, it's literally just like the person who is singing the song, which happens to be me at the time, is so negatively framed in the context of the world, or they think they are because they're watching other people be happy and kind of being left behind. That's very real, and all these things are things that nobody really wants to admit. I have all these friends who talk about it all the time, but when people come up and ask, or we try to get them to talk about it in person, they're kind of like, well, that's not what I meant. I meant like, no, it's fine. Like, as long as you hang out with me, like, I'm good. But the fact of the matter is, it's true. Because we all go home at some point, and we all have to deal with ourselves at some point. And it goes back to, you know, knowing how to deal with your emotions. Nobody told me I was allowed to deal with my emotions. Really gave me the environment to do that. And I had to do it. But everybody has it. And that's the thing about mental health, is that it's, you know, you get a cold, you don't go, oh man, I have a cold. Funny, I'm going to go run a marathon. You go, I'm going to probably take a second for myself to figure out, like, if I can do these things, if it's healthy. And, mental health's the same way. You know, you start feeling bad, you got to take a second, you got to go, maybe I need time to myself. Maybe I need to figure out why I'm sad. Maybe, you know, and oftentimes people I spoke to, it is those things. It's the way they're viewed in social media. It's the way that people tell them, you know, it's them being sensitive, or they should just get over it or whatever. But these songs are really heavy. I mean, the last song on the album is literally me singing about my childhood with parents, who are heavily dependent on drugs, you know? So it's like, you know, there's a lot of honesty on it. And I think that's probably the takeaway, is like, don't be anything but honest. I mean, constructively, don't go around burning shit, but like, you know, it's different to sit down and be like, this is how I feel. This is what would make it better. And if somebody you're telling isn't listening, that's a different story. But, you know, it should be a dialogue. It should be something, you know, that you talk about. Again, when you get a cold, your significant other, your parents, your friends, they all check in on you, or at least the ones that care. And it should be the same way all the time. And you should have that open, you know, communication. And this music is just a step in that direction, making that more normal.
I think that, that's especially, I mean, it's always true. That's always a true message, but especially right now, people are feeling overwhelmed. We're in quarantine. A lot of people are scared. The crisis lines are receiving, I think the statistic was an 800% influx of calls since April last year to April this year. Yeah.
I don't know that, but that sounds right.
It's insane, because people right now are struggling, and I started struggling for a while because I had went through this healing process, and I found a place where, okay, I'm happy now. Then I find myself starting having anxiety and a couple panic attacks here and there. And I'm like, wait, does that mean I'm not healed? Does that mean that I failed? Does that mean that everything was a lie? No, it means you're human. And I know that I'm always going to struggle with more susceptibility to that. And like you said, holding space for that, knowing when to take a step back and saying, I need to breathe, I need to focus on me right now. We're talking to someone, be it, us or a counselor, or finding a support group, or even a Facebook group of people, that are minded. And that's what I want to create here. That's why I said we're all about breaking that mental health stigma. I want people to be able to come here, share their stories, hear other people's stories, other people's struggles, and know, number one, they're not alone. Number two, they always have a place to go.
Yeah. Super important.
Yeah.
Because some people don't have that, and that's actually probably why the rate has increased so much. Because even though I don't know that fact, like that statistic, it sounds correct to me, and I think the reason is that I know the reason is that these people are actually, when you have a life and you can go outside and you can go to your job and you can go hang out with your friends, you're not stuck in the relationships that constantly take pieces away from you, of yourself. And with quarantine, you don't have that. You don't have that outlet because you cannot go to work unless you're an essential worker. You can't go outside and hang out with your friends. I mean, at the very least, that's stigmatized just on the image alone, right? It's like you see like 3 people at the park, you're like, what the fuck are they doing? Go home. Like you're ruining this for the rest of us. And it's like, yeah, maybe that was helpful for them, and maybe they couldn't go back to the house they were at or whatever. But a lot of people are they're confined in this box where the bad things in their lives that they could get away from are now staring you straight in the face. And unfortunately, that also means you're staring yourself in the face. A lot of people don't do that. And maybe they should.
I think this has been a really good time for self-reflection and whatnot. But, Jamie, you were talking about how you said your dad was happy as he could be right before he passed away, the best time of his life and everything. And I know a lot of people on the internet have ran with this fact, have started a lot of conspiracy theories and hoaxes. And for the love of all that is holy, can you please, just once and for all bust this bull crap? Because I have literally almost broken people's noses over starting this crap on my pages or on my stories about mental health or my stories about your dad or whatever. I've almost gotten in fist fights. So to keep me out of jail, can you please just once and for all put an end to this?
Yeah, I mean, it depends which one you want. Is it he's the orphan son of John Podesta? Because that shit's funny as fuck.
All cover-up conspiracy. It was really a murder. It wasn't really a suicide, which, by the way, I think is super, not only disrespectful to you and the rest of your family, but I think it minimizes the mental health struggles he went through. It minimizes the fact that he can be happy. I had a smile on my face. I was at a Justin Timberlake concert the night before I almost committed suicide, and I had a smile on my face, and I was dancing, and I was singing, and less than 24 hours later, I was on the ledge ready to end everything. Smiling does not mean
it's that quick. It's a slippery slope, and once you're in it, you're in it. And I honestly, I can say this without a doubt. I don't know what he was going through, because my dad and I, and I've been told not to talk about this because it paints him in a negative light and whatever, but it's my relationship, it's my experience. Some father-son pairings are really good and some are really bad. And my, relationship with my dad is like super hot and cold. But that's because I'm like, who knows what he was really struggling with, because he never told us. I don't know. He could have been, and this is not me saying that he's bipolar, but he could have been bipolar. He could have been dealing with any number of things that I just didn't know about. I didn't talk to him for 6 months before he died. And that was because I had talked to him about the fact that I was going to kill myself. And that's like one of those things where you're like, oh, weird. Like, it's not to say that he's a bad dad. He just disappeared because he was whatever. But, that obviously resonated with him on a certain level, because for about 6 months after that, he actively avoided me, which is a super weird thing to do. And then according to everybody else, he was doing his best. But like, speaking from somebody who was on the outside of that, I didn't really see that. But I didn't really know what was going on either, because he's struggled with depression his entire life. I didn't know that. Why would I? He never took me to therapy. He never got me diagnosed, but he got my brother diagnosed. So like, he kind of knew. And the thing is like, it is the stigma. That's the problem. My dad was one of the most caring people in the world when he was allowed to be. But, when you talk about a mental illness, you're not allowed to be that. So, especially as like an icon, if you will. Like, I mean, I think a lot of people would agree, at least most people in the U.S. kind of know who he is. And I don't think that's like pretentious to say. So,
they're just uncultured swine.
No, I mean, everybody has their taste and their opinions on things. And I've had people tell me all sorts of things about, well, I've had people point the finger at me for, and be like, well, you should have been if you were a better son, you would have known and you would have stopped him. I'm like, okay, well, you could say that, but I was involuntarily removed from my father's and I's relationship, like,
you weren't.
You don't know that. And it's like, and then there's like the, like, I think somebody, because we were just talking about this, I put out a letter where I retaliated against online bullying because people were bullying me. And, right when my dad died, for like probably somewhere between like 6 and 8 months after that, I was just getting a bunch of like random LP fans who were like, you should kill yourself too, because obviously like, you're the problem. Groundless. Like, they didn't even give a case. They were just saying these things because it's easy to say. But, especially when you're not saying it in person. And, one guy threatened to like, I think it was like curb stomp me or something. It was weird. And I was just kind of like, I don't know who you are and I don't know why you would say that. But if you want to say things like that, then everybody can see who you are. And I just kind of put them on blast. You see the letter, you can see the reactions to it. I still get reactions to it to this day.
I read the letter and I was just, holy crap. It was amazing. I'll link that down below so you guys can watch it if you want to. But, from my personal experience, and I obviously have no clue what your dad was going through, but from my personal experience, when I was in that very, very dark place and I was starting to become suicidal, I was starting to become very depressed, I would push away other people that were having those feelings, because even if it was close friends to me, it kind of exacerbated my own. So if one of my friends would come to me and be like, hey, I'm really struggling, I know that it was terribly wrong of me to do, but it was just, I can't deal with this because I'm trying to strive.
I think that's what that is. I think when people get like, when, people are like, oh, you have a safe place with me, you can always talk to me. And then you talk to them and they're like, ooh, that's not my thing. Like, oh, I don't know. That's like, I don't even know what that, they do know. And that's the thing. It's like, everybody knows. Everybody deals with it. And it's something that they're just not going to acknowledge, because sometimes people literally do chalk it up to like, I just have an attitude. It's like, no, you don't. You deal with a lot of things. You deal with a lot of people telling you bad things or doing bad things to you, even if it's really subtle. And also, like, you don't know what you were born with. You don't know, what you gained over time. Those things are really, it's kind of like an addiction where you don't really see it coming. And then all of a sudden you're like hopped up on coke and you're just like, I don't even know when did I take this? I don't know when I took it. And, that's not I don't have addiction issues. I don't really do a whole lot of that kind of stuff. I'm not a party person either. So, that's not like a subtle, like, ooh, I have like a cocaine addiction, everybody. No. But that's kind of what it's like. Cause a lot of these people, who are addicted to substance, they don't realize it's going on until it's there. And then they're like, but I don't have a problem though, because I didn't have a problem. And you're like, but you kind of did incrementally over time. And I've been in that slippery place too, obviously, like I just said. And it is like, it's a paradoxical thing, because you are simultaneously able to like reach out, if you will, and like feel things out with, in terms of like help and support, but you never feel like it's authentic. You don't, because you're just like, for whatever reason, your brain tells you it's not. And I guarantee that implicit reason is because people often subtly tell you that it doesn't matter.
Yeah. And I feel like we actually, society kind of does that. Society has kind of purported that message. I will say, I got an email the other day. I posted this mental health thing about my story and about when I stepped down from the ledge and everything. And this guy emailed me and was like, well, you should have taken the other option. You should have jumped. Yeah. And at first I got really upset because I'm like, you don't even know me. What is your problem? But then I stopped to think and I said, wait a second. When I was in that place, when I was depressed, I hated every single person that was happy. Yeah. I hated every single person who wasn't feeling what I felt. And after a bit, like after I stood for a bit, I emailed him back and I said, whatever it is you're going through that makes you wish death on a stranger on the internet, I'm really sorry and I hope you find the peace and healing you need. And I know that the people that reached out to you are human scum, but I think at the same time, they're going through obviously their own struggles. We all grieved in our own way, when your dad passed, the fan base grieved in our own ways and in different levels. And for me, actually, here, I'll admit this to everyone, I swore I'd never say this out loud, but for me, I got really pissed to Linda. I just hated that one. I know nothing about her, but I'm just like, oh, like if she would have just taken better, and I did get very, I was smart enough not to, go onto her social media and claim obviously I have that restraint, but we do go through the anger part of grief, like you were talking about when you were angry, at your dad for different reasons, and that just happened to be how it came out, and it's wrong, and I'm sorry on behalf of all the real Linkin Park fans and all of humanity in general.
It's so weird because when I dealt with the grief of my father, there was no privacy at all. Like, even when you're at home, we had a construction fence we had it installed around that green, or like, I guess it's like the chain link with the green tarp over it. We put it around the entire house. And people were putting up like vigils and like posters and standing outside all day. Like, people came from like Germany to come do this. And it's like simultaneously, like, you're floored by it for a lot of different reasons. And some of them are really positive. Like, oh my God, wow, these people really do care. And then you get like the awkward side of it where like people suddenly know your address that you haven't talked to in years and they're sending you letters like they know you, and you're like, oh, that was done a long time ago. Or like, you have people who don't know the privacy standards or, I guess like tradition of American households, and they walk up and they push the doorbell and they're trying to get into the house and like just not to like invade space, but like to come personal respect. And it's not disrespect, because when you say like, hey, can you not do that? That's not cool. They're like, oh, so sorry, I didn't know. And that's fine. They leave. And yes, I guess like it's kind of disrespectful to go to a person's home anyways. But, at the same time, like, you're dealing with somebody who's he's beyond that. And he's actually so far beyond normal understanding of celebrity in his circle that, people they don't apply natural a lot of those things. They just kind of like, they become something more abstract, and it's so odd because they're not people anymore. There are some like genuine people, but most of them faceless, like LP Soldier Warrior people. They're like, okay, like, for example, like, I could do something amazing. I hit 2 million views on the Grey Days music video that I did 5 months ago, which is like a really cool thing because that should not have gotten that. If you wrote it out on paper, it sounds like a failure, but it was really cool, and I got 2 million views and a lot of, there are some like 60,000 comments or something like that. Every single one of them is about him. Nobody read the interview. Nobody read the article that I did on it. Nobody, asked me real questions. Why is Jamie not getting attention for this at all? And I'm not like bitter. I did it, like I said about the album. Like, I really don't. It touches who it needs to touch, and that's it. That's my own art, and I don't do it for them in the first place. I do it for me. So I already got what I needed out of it. I don't need the validation of other people for it, but if other people tend to gravitate towards it, whether it's in the future or now, that's awesome. But it's just like, if these people are coming out of nowhere and being like, where's the attention here? Maybe rethink what you're doing, because the video itself, for example, is not about him. I've expressly stated it is about me and my journey I happen to do it in this context, but it's about me and my grieving journey, my spiritual journey. And every single, I would say, it's obviously, per comment, it's not a person, so it's not 60,000 people, but it's like still a couple tens of thousands of people are like totally ignoring that and just going, but it's Chester and we gotta preserve his legacy. And I had a guy on Instagram tell me the other day, anybody can go look at this comment. I'm not trying to embarrass him, or them. I don't know what their gender orientation is, but it's so ridiculous. They were just like, I want you to join Linkin Park and Grey Days for future albums, and when you have a kid and he looks like Chester, you should name him Chester Jr. and just teach him how to sing and all this stuff. And like, it just kind of is like very long, and I just was like, in all caps, I was just like, yeah, just like the animal he is, and I'll teach him to roll over too. Just kind of like being a dick. Yeah. It's funny to me. I'm sure that they were kind of like, I don't really understand that. And they might have even been from a different country, because I tend to get comments like that from people who don't mean that, but they're speaking like German or French or something, and they just trying to translate it. So it was kind of like a prank on my own self, because they're not going to get it. But I just had like a fly flying around. But yeah, it's I don't know. It's really weird, because at that point people aren't even thinking about like the actual emotional context or content of anybody. Because people go on to Linda's page. I mean, I've defended publicly on Twitter and whatnot against my insane family members and whatever. It's like a Game of Thrones show, but it's set in the era of like FaceTime and Twitter. But my family history is like insane. Oh, there are sprinklers on. That's fine. And okay, I'll be right back. No, I'd be happy to go through and like touch on whatever specific things that you're talking about.
My specific one was the whole one that it's his death is a conspiracy. Now that was the one that I was saying specifically that it was a cover up and it was really murder. That was the one I was specifically saying, please just put an end to that, because it's ridiculous. But,
yeah, no, I can see why people would think that. I think when he died, I was obviously like, well, I think it's obvious. He had depression. It was clear. And he died by suicide, which is the way that we are trying to say it to break down the stigma. It's not committed, because it's not a choice. It's not a rational decision you make. So died by suicide is better. And it kind of offers everybody who has died by suicide the benefit of the doubt that they weren't themselves, which is true every day. So,
you're not.
Yeah, the person I am right now is not the person I was when I was in that deep dark hole, and it's amazing the difference. But I can see why people might say something like, "Hey, Chris Cornell died similarly, and it was on his birthday, so of course, like, whoa." And maybe there were factors involved with that. I mean, it's not like we can go ask him, so I guess we'll just have to take it for what it is. But I don't think it was child pornography rings or sex slavery. I don't think it was Pizzagate. I don't think he's John Podesta's orphaned son and he somehow knew about all this stuff. And, the grounds for all of that is that Chris Cornell openly spoke about the corruption and sex slavery of children and things like that. At least from my knowledge, I believe I've seen some arguments on that are, I mean, they make sense, but I know that, that was not Chris's case. It was not some weird conspiracy where these like hyper elite came in and killed him in the bathroom while his wife is in the next room. That doesn't make any sense. Like, it doesn't make any sense. And these things are interesting and they're fun to talk about, but they're ultimately just like, if you think beyond, like a reasonable doubt, it suddenly goes to like nothing. You're like, there's nothing here. Once you get past the cloud of intrigue, because it is a cloud, it obscures your vision and all these things, it's like, and your judgment, you go, wait, no, oh, well, right, he has a 20-year career where he talks about how he's depressed and how he wants to die and how he's trying not to. Have you heard Leave Out All the Rest? Have you heard?
That song is the song that got me through my mom's death. When my mom died, I went into complete shock, And I remember being in the hospital, and I was just like alone, like in my little hospital gown, just singing that song to myself over and over. So that song was like what got me through. But yeah, like that or Heavy. Like, I'm just sitting there going, it was obvious. But for the record, I just want to say that I did read your interview around Soul Song, and I want to talk. Before you and I started talking, so it wasn't just something that you and I started talking. I'm like, maybe I should go like research it.
Yeah.
I at the time that it came out, but I want to talk about more. You have a short film coming out called A Chant that kind of goes over the mental health stigma and your own struggles with mental health. Can you give us a sneak peek on that?
Yeah, I mean, so it's been in production hell for like almost a year in post. So a lot of people are probably thinking that I'm just like talking about it to pretend it's alive or whatever. It's like, it's not the Weekend at Bernie's. It's just like, I'm literally on my fourth editor. So it's like, it's in purgatory. And, but the film is really, about, paranoid schizophrenia, which is odd because I have a lot of, especially when I was really in it, before I wrote it. The reason it appealed to me is because I was experiencing similar thing, to the character. I would hallucinate all the time. I would, have these panic attacks, this depression. I would go through these things where I would, PTSD, things like that, where you're like, not really sure what's going on. And like the world kind of like time kind of seems to like implode and then it stands still and you're just like, I don't, I mean, that's essentially what depression is.
Yeah.
When like severe depression. But when I heard the story, I was listening to the audiobook, which I love audiobooks, and I was listening to this really long one that's a collection of short stories called The Skeleton Crew by Stephen King, and Will Patton, who went on to actually voice one of my favorite books Stephen King's ever written called The Outsider. He read this poem about this paranoid schizophrenic who was like, there was no attachment to reality. It was just like abstract little things he was picking up and being like, oh, this is out to get me, or oh, this is suspicious. And the way it was performed and obviously the writing itself, because it has to be in the writing first, is like, it just spoke so clearly to the mental state I was in. And I was like, oh, I can see every shot of this, and I expanded like 100-line poem to something around 35 minutes of footage, which is a 35-page script. And every time I tell people that, where I'm like, yeah, I actually relate a lot to the character. This used to kind of almost be my life. They're always like, oh my God, that's so scary. Like, wow, you must have like really been sick or like hurt or something. And I'm like, I don't know, but like that was my response to it, like weird things happen when your brain eats itself alive, and there's no way to really explain it. And I think the people who get it are always like, they don't even say anything. They're just like, cool, like, can't wait to watch it, But other people who don't, they're like, wow, that's so heavy. Like, you're such like an artist. I'm like, yeah, okay. But yeah, it's the idea behind it was never to make something exploitative, because obviously when I realized that I actually dealt with a great amount of mental adversity, I obviously had like a first-hand experience of like, this is very serious, it's very real. And then that was also in the context of my father passing away, and then in the context of like the insanity that is my family on both sides, my mother and my father's side. And I was just kind of like, I'm kind of tired of watching movies like, The Number 23, where it's just Jim Carrey being cool and doing like a crazy, wacky thing with a cool twist. It's not a bad movie. It's fun. But that's the thing, it's fun.
It's not like realistic to mental health struggles,
no,
at least in my opinion, which is shocking because Jim Carrey does go through he has his own history of mental health.
He's incredible.
Oh yeah. So I kind of went into it expecting it to be more of a reflection of mental health struggles, and I'm like,
Eternal Sunshine is like one of the greatest movies of all time, and he is phenomenal in that. I mean, if you watch, oh man, I'm not going to remember it now because I want to remember it, but Kidding, his show on Showtime, phenomenal. I mean, Jim is like a heavyweight champion when it comes to really portraying serious situations, and it's because he experienced them, It's like, it's coming from a real place, and I think that's where that's where I relate to him a lot, is the honesty in his experience and his ability to tell that story in different ways. But I want to see something like Kidding. I want to see something like The United States of Terror or Twin Peaks or like, fuck, even like a movie like The Master by Paul Thomas Anderson is like, I always feel like I'm saying that wrong because I always want to say Wes Anderson, but he,
yes, myself too.
yeah, I get tripped up because it's an Anderson and then I'm like, which one's Paul and which one's Wes? But they're very different. And, even something like The Master with Joaquin Phoenix and Philip Seymour Hoffman, like, it's all psychological. And I think that movie is really good because it really expresses the programmability of people. Like, you realize, like, everything that you do is kind of based off of this code that somebody else has put into you. Like, essentially, you're like a computer, and until you realize that, you can't put the real effort in and rewriting that code. And I mean, Eternal Sunshine's like that too. And all these things I just mentioned are like that. And, in my opinion, it was my responsibility to be, the next person to take that on. I'm not the only person. I mean, watch Euphoria on HBO or like The Leftovers or even Watchmen. Damon Lindelof's really, really good at expressing these things. Watchmen had a whole thing on intergenerational, trauma and how it's passed down from, one generation to the next and how they deal with it or it becomes their disease. And so this is stuff that's like pushing into the mainstream right now. Even Fargo's doing it right now. And that is like the pool of people I come from, is like, those are all my inspirations. So obviously I'm going to try to do something real. And with A Chant, it was writing a script was really fun, but then I started peeling back things because I was like, well, this is spectacular. This is like a really fun way to look at it, and like, ooh, like trippy visions and stuff. And then it became more of like, okay, well, this guy is like trapped himself in his own home, which is what depression does to you. You isolate yourself and you trap yourself, and you're often made to believe it's because of other people or other things, but it's really you doing it. And because ultimately, if it wasn't, you could all, not if it wasn't. Ultimately, you're the one who makes you happy, so you're the one who puts you in a box. A lot of people don't know that, but that's the truth.
I don't think a lot of people want to come to terms with that because that's something that I read through my healing process. But if so when I came back from Canada after the near suicide attempt, I got in contact with Diamond Dallas Page. I've been a certified DDP yoga instructor, so him and I talk sometimes. And he is like a wrestling legend. And he kind of connected me to my dad in a way because I grew up bonding over wrestling with my dad. And I messaged him and I was like, look, I'm just really struggling. And I didn't tell him the depth of it. I'm really struggling and I don't know what to do. And his exact response was, you got yourself into this. It's on you to get it out. And he knew that I was going through depression. And had anybody else in the world told me that, I would have punched him in the face. But number one, I could take on Diamond Dallas Page. Number two, it was kind of that fatherly advice I needed to hear. And I needed someone to, I'd already had a counselor, I'll get into that in a minute, but I already had a therapist that had kind of shot me down. But I needed someone to just continue to empower me to take control of my own life. And that's what I started doing when I created my Happiness Boost course and the 5 puzzle pieces of happiness is how can you get to the top of your own personal happiness spectrum. It might look different for you, but there is a level of taking back your power, taking control of your mental health. And that Absolutely. Is in a lot of ways.
There's a movie on Netflix right now, it just came out. Charlie Kaufman directed it and adapted it. It's called I'm Thinking of Ending Things. And it's Jesse Plemons and I believe her name's Jessie Buckley. But she's really, really amazing. I haven't seen her before. She's in Fargo too this season, which is really great. She's a phenomenal actress as far as I've seen. But the movie, she's like this character that kind of nitpicks Jake, this male character, and she's like, well, he does all this and that, and the world's so horrible and blah, 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 blah. But she's also like optimistic in a lot of ways. And she finally gets to this point where she meets somebody and she's like, I'm looking for my boyfriend. Have you seen him? He's like, blah, 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 a list of just negative things, all these negative things. And the guy stops and he's like, well, I haven't seen anybody like that, but I see you. And then she starts crying and she's like, thank you. And she gives him a hug. And that's true. It's like, you're the one bringing that into your life. You're the one doing that. Like, it's not your fault that someone is the way they are. It's that you're not responsible for them, but you are responsible for yourself and what you allow into your life. And that was the message of that, is like, well, you sit and you fixate on all these things that are bad, but you never once stopped and went, well, what does he do right? Or like, what is he trying to do? And what does he need more time for? And this character just goes, well, I don't see that guy that you're describing that you clearly don't like, but I do see you. And you're the one who's giving all this negative stuff off. And she just is like, well, thank you for telling me that. I'm going to go on my own journey now. It's a really sweet moment. It's an abstract movie. If you're a David Lynch fan or anything like that, you will definitely love that movie. I've watched it with my partner and she loves it and we love it and we just can talk about it for hours. And we showed it to our friend and he's just like, I fucking hate this movie. I don't know why you watched it. So it really depends. Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Taste thing. But I'm also, I just mentioned David Lynch and to tie it back to the film, like I'm a massive David Lynch fan. And like true David Lynch fan, not like, oh, I like Twin Peaks because it's quirky. I mean, like I've seen everything he's ever done. I follow his YouTube page. I love his art. I love the mentality, his spiritualism, a practice of meditation. I don't practice TM. I practice more like mindful meditation. But the thing with David's work that people don't seem to understand is that he's coming from the perspective of somebody who adequately deals with all those negative things. He's showing it in an abstract way because when you're in it and you're sick and you are dealing with depression on a severe level or you're dealing with ideation on a severe level, again, time does not work the same way. Your brain does not see things the same way. You almost start to hallucinate. And I said hallucinate earlier. I'm not backtracking on it, but it's not like a hard physical thing. It's like out of the corner of your eyes or some weird shit. You get spooked. And that's what it is. It's this feeling of uncertainty. It's this feeling of like not being safe no matter what. And, his work is abstract because it accurately reflects the states in which you would be in if you were actually in that state of depression or emotional adversity, because that's the way it looks. There's a reason a lot of people can't remember the things that they went through when they come out of it. I don't remember my childhood. I don't remember about, probably I would say like 96% of if I had to guess percentage wise of my childhood, I just don't know. And it's a big black space. And I know that whatever I was going through accurately is depicted in these films where I'm like, well, yeah, it was slippery, wasn't it? It was abstract, wasn't it? Because data does not come in the same way that it does when you're healthy and you're actually on top of your, whatever you're dealing with. And, that's something I strove to do with The Chant, which was be abstract, but be meaningfully abstract, where you go through it and you can make your own interpretation. I would say there's a correct interpretation to the film, and I don't think it's hard to come to, but, there are elements where it's a bit more heady and dreamlike, but the dream is the reality. And that's what I tried to do. And I also had it, I told you like proofread and kind of vetted for authenticity by Dr. Barbara Van Dalen. And she's with Given Hour Change Direction, the campaign to change direction. And now she's with the White House working on preventing veteran suicide. And because that's how much that meant to me. It's like, I don't want to give you the number 23 as fun as it is. That's not accurate. What's accurate is Eternal Sunshine or, these bigger things that really make you think about what you're going through, why you're going through it, and how to get out of it. I think one of the biggest things anybody's ever taken away from a David Lynch film, whether they liked it or not, is that it actually moves something inside of you. Most people are like, it affected me and I don't know how. Because it's teaching you. And you don't know how to listen to it because you don't know what that means. You don't know what that sounds like. Because most people don't have that kind of relationship with themselves or the people around them.
I feel like you don't necessarily know what lesson you're learning, but it's teaching you something. That's the best way to
exactly. And I think the more you watch it, the more you get into it, the more you're like, oh, I see why that resonated with me. Like one of my favorite movies of all time is Mulholland Drive. And I watched it twice in the same day. I watched it once, I watched it again. Because I watched it once by myself and I was like, brain exploded. And then I watched it with my roommate at the time and I was like, you have to watch it. Like, I can't be the only one to experience. And I sat him down and he watched it. The movie's like 2-something hours long, and I think it's over 2 hours long. And he was just like, why did you make me do that? Like, this sucked. This movie's not good. But, that says a lot about somebody, in my opinion. film says a lot about somebody, art says a lot about somebody. If you're not picking up what they're intending to show you, it's like, where are you then? Like, what path are you on? Maybe, I don't know. In my opinion, if you don't get David Lynch, maybe you're not where you're supposed to be. But, you know, that's also my opinion, and it's not a fact. So, but yeah, I think a lot of people are, you know, they, it's like when like what you said earlier about you going to your friend, and like, well, I need you, or them coming to you and being like, I need you in this moment, and you're kind of like repulsed by it. You're like, I don't want that. That sounds like fucking horrible. I don't want to be dealing with that. It's because you do need to focus on yourself, but also you're afraid of what they're doing. And I think when people watch films like any of the ones that I just mentioned, or any of the works that I just mentioned, you get that. Somebody comes up to you and they go, here's all this information. This is, you know, teaching you something on this. And you're like, I don't want it. This is too much for me. You know what you're seeing. You don't know how to translate it. And it's offensive to you because of that exact reason. Because you don't want it, because it's showing the truth of what you're going through. Beautiful. But I tried to do that. The story essentially revolves around a character who locks himself into his own world and then slowly feeds himself negativity. He just feeds himself lies until they eventually become real to him. And yeah, I mean, I think I resonated with it at the time because I wasn't afraid to admit that that was what I was going through. And that's exactly, I'm not schizophrenic. I don't have paranoid schizophrenia. I will not say that I understand what it's like that, but the way in which it was conveyed, I found a lot of things that resonated with me. And, I don't think it's constructive to do that to myself if other people obviously would feel the same way. And just, you know, not to go too much further on a tangent, but, you know, I grew up in a family where a lot of people looked up to them and they were like, whoa, this is beyond human, you know, godlike almost. And it's not. And, I think for a long time, I didn't understand that I could have depression because I was like, well, I have so many things in my life that should be good. Like, my father is wealthy. I live in a good house. I go to a good school. I didn't have to pay tuition. I didn't have to work in college. You know, I had a family that supported me in my musical endeavors and my artistic endeavors, you know, like, and then I realized, like, well, but that doesn't mean you're happy, though. And that doesn't have to mean anything, actually. That's just something somebody gave to you as a gift. It has nothing to do with who you are and what you're going through. In my case, that's actually not so true. A lot of my condition at the time, and even sometimes now, I still struggle to keep myself out of certain things. But, you know, it actually did come from my family, which is also something that I didn't want to hear because my family's supposed to be the place that doesn't happen, right? I think everybody's taught that your nuclear family, your classical American nuclear family is your dad goes to work and he supports you. Your mom is emotionally supportive. Your siblings are annoying, but they love you and they'll support you no matter what. And that is not true. None of that is a lie. That is very, very much a fantasy. It may be the case for some people, but it's not the case for most people. Even when you have all of the wealth and connection and affluence that maybe you might have in a rock star's family like that. And that's also something that I strove to do to convey through the film and the production process. I produced it. I got the money and I did it all on my own because it was about me and it was about my journey. And I didn't take handouts from anybody. So, which I probably could have gotten if I asked. We talked about that too, where I was like, I could have presented the album in a certain way. I could have gotten a lot of traction or something, but I didn't because that's not the point of the thing.
And, you know, truthfully, I know we haven't really known each other for very long, just started chatting a couple days ago, but I have so much mad respect for you because of that, just because so many people nowadays, I won't name any names or anything, but you have these actors' kids that literally get into acting because they're so-and-so's kid, and they kind of ride in on their parents' coattails, and that's not fair. I mean, there's a difference between carrying on your dad's legacy, you know, and
willingly.
Keeping conversation
doing, yeah.
And, you know, taking advantage of being like, hey, so I'm Chester's son. You want to, you know, buy my album? I spent so much respect for you for not being that person. So thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
So when I was suicidal in my late 20s, I tried to get into a therapy. Like, I tried to see someone, and it took me months. It took one of my friends a year. He was suicidal to get into therapy. A year, like when he's suicidal.
Yeah.
And when my mom passed away, we were mentioning this a little bit ago, I didn't heal, at everyone else's pace that society thought I should. When your dad passed away and it affected me, even though I never knew your family or anything, it did affect me, and I did grieve in my own way because, him and his music helped me through so much. I was literally told by a mental health professional, that's inappropriate and you don't deserve to grieve him, grow up. And I'm just...
Oh, that's interesting.
There's just so much broken about our conversation with mental health, about our mental health system. It's terrible. What do you think our focuses should be to move forward as a society or as individuals with the mental health area? And do you think we're doing anything right in the realm of mental health?
I like the positive spin on that. Are we doing anything right? I think I will answer that first because it's the easiest thing to say. Absolutely. I think we're doing a lot of things right. I actually think that people are, I was in my own bubble for a long time with COVID, where I just kind of I went to work, I came home, or at the time, maybe at the beginning of COVID, I didn't have a job, so I'd figure out how to sustain myself with the same two people in my life all the time. It was kind of at that point, I was already kind of outside of my family, estranged, if you will, and it didn't really matter to me on that side, keeping up with people in general. Obviously, my family matters to me. I'm a very family-oriented person. Maybe that's not obvious. You don't know that side of me. I'm a very family-oriented person. I believe in community. I believe in those relationships. I miss my family all the time, but at the moment, it's it doesn't really jive very well for my mental health. The way they're living is fine. It's their way of living. My way of living is a little different. And when COVID happened, it was so hard to be I don't know what to do with myself. I practiced meditation already. I was writing and doing all of these artistic things, but then there's the side of you that is hey, so when we sit down and we don't do anything and we're not distracting ourselves, what does that look like? Are we going to be okay? And, I had to struggle with that a lot. And all of the shows, and I typically go through novels or film or sometimes television. It depends, but those are most of my therapeutic tools. And, Haruki Murakami is one of my favorite authors of all time. He's amazing. And he gets it, and I'll read him and I'll feel better about a lot of things, or I'll start to explore different things, and that's interesting. And he's very positive on the mental health side because he addresses all of the things that people don't want to talk about in Japanese society. And, even American society, a lot of his work focuses on the American influence on Japanese society as well. And, Damon Lindelof, The Leftovers, Watchmen, he's one of my idols. He's so good at touching on these things and making them impactful. If you've seen The Leftovers, you know what I'm talking about. You probably didn't stop crying the entire time.
I cried a lot.
It's basically just I think artists in general are now having a time to themselves that they didn't have before, where they can sit down and go, this is what I want to do though. And especially with people working at home, people not working at all and realizing the government isn't really doing anything for them at all. I didn't even get a COVID check. So I don't, it's and I know people who've gone too. And it's I feel there's favoritism. I think they know I live in Flagstaff, which is liberal as all hell. So it's I think they know that. I don't want to say and point fingers to who's doing what, but it certainly feels that way. And, I think a lot of artists are kind of going, I don't see the world the way I used to, because when the world shuts down, there's no system. There's just me and what I do and what I would need to talk about. And there are a lot of constructive and proactive, beats. People are talking about racism, systemic racism, nationality, overzealous nationalists. America has a lot of those. The North America has a lot of those because there actually are two Americas. And, I think on the artist front, there are a lot of people saying really good things. I don't know if you're watching Fargo right now, but it's essentially the immigrant history it's a fictionalized version of American history where these immigrant gangs are going at each other in a country that forces them to fight each other over things. It's the black gang versus the Italian gang. It's, the Irish versus the Italian. It's these like super racist concepts. You get to see where they come from. And you're like, oh wait, no wonder we're dealing with all these problems. It's because of these problems, right? This came off that way because we imported millions of people to do our dirty work, killed them, and then even before that, like, why do we still celebrate Christopher Columbus Day? He literally cut people's arms off, made them eat their own bodies, made dogs sent them off into the fucking forest and had dogs set after them to kill them because he just wanted to do it for fun. Tons of rape, murder, destroying families, displacing people, all because he wanted to mine a mineral he knew didn't exist on the continent. Or at least
not a guy I particularly want to be saying, hey, let's put a ship in our front yard. I mean, when you stop to think about it, who even celebrates Christopher Columbus Day? It's not like we're putting ships in our front yard and saying, hey, let's give our neighbors smallpox.
It doesn't make any sense. And I think people are starting to realize, like, a lot of these things are kind of bullshit. And, like, I think that that's constructive because we're actually not just getting people. I think before, like in the last 5 years or so, it's been a lot of like, fuck you, you're racist, I hate you, you're white, so you're automatically a bad person or whatever. And some of that's true, but I think it's gone from like a volatile, like plasma state to something a little bit more like constructive. Like, hey, I'm going to show you why I feel this way. I'm going to show you the history. I'm going to show you these things, explain them to you instead of just being mad that you don't know. And that's really cool. So I think the entertainment industry is really going in that route. I think even like comedies like Pen 15 on Hulu, which are just phenomenal, they're real and they talk about real shit and they like it's more female oriented, I would say, like than like say Big Mouth, but they're essentially the same show. One's just real people and one's cartoons. And these things are important. And a lot of people are talking about, even just like relationships, sexuality, racism, politics, all these things, they're talking about them in a really constructive way. On the other hand, you have the government actively trying to do something different. Yeah. And I mean, watching Hulu is hard because we don't have the ad removal. So it's like fighting commercials and shit. And I'm not against any.
I don't watch YouTube. I'm like, good God, I don't
hard.
watch the political thing.
Yeah, and it's not good for your mental health because you're stuck in a box and you know that you're not being treated fairly. You know that you're not getting the care that you deserve. You know that your family is probably suffering because these two people are fighting over a seat of power that doesn't really do much for anybody at this point. Not to get too political, but I mean, it really is that case. Like, you have like mudslinging campaigns where I saw one last night where it was like Biden's trying to like fill the courts so that it's overpopulated or what. It's like, but is that really what we asked for as liberals? Or did we just ask for the really old 100-year-old multimillionaire, Senate member, Supreme Court member to just sit down for a little while and let somebody else do the driving? I think that's what we asked for. I don't think it was death to all white people or Mexicans should go back to where they belong. I don't think it's not racist. It's not, but these things are being skewed in a certain way because there is an agenda. There's something that they're trying to say, and it's wrong and it's not healthy. And, I think politics is a big place in the negative side of mental health because it is about pitting people against each other. That is the core of politics. It's not about coming together. It's about who can we turn against who to get the most numbers so that I can sit there and spend as much money as I want, do whatever I want, say whatever I want. And that's not what politics should be about. It's not. People like to say it wasn't always that way, but I mean, if you want to really look at the history, maybe you might feel differently, at least in terms of American politics, because those guys were not Christians and they were not kind and they were all racist and they were all pro-slavery. Just saying. But I think a lot of people are coming to the realization that these things are true, and they're kind of like over it. So I think a lot of really positive stuff's going on. The negative stuff is unfortunately much stronger than the positive stuff, because it always is. It's like the whole concept of, well, you put yourself in the box when you're in depression, now you're putting yourself in a place of happiness when you're working through your business. And it's the same thing where it's like, the depression is heavy, and it's honestly the thing I remember most when I start getting upset or start slipping back into things. I start remembering like, oh yeah, this does suck, nothing does work. And then you're like, okay, but what about like, my partner and I talk about this all the time. We're like, but what about all the good things that happen in between there? Like you're getting really, like I personally am getting really caught up on things that are wrong and bad and, just manically like, everything sucks, I want to burn it all down. And then all of a sudden it's like, yeah, okay, but like, now that you're having this moment, what about the last 2 months or the last couple weeks where you did something that was really positive? And I'm like, oh shit, yeah, huh? Oh yeah, yeah, you're right. Like, yeah, maybe that is true. and then you start to realize like, oh, the negative things are way easier to hold on to than the positive things for many reasons. And one of those is, your biological system, and the other one is that you just, as a person, you're built and programmed to accept certain things as normal. And when you go through depression, you're taught that's normal and that you shouldn't care about it and that it isn't affecting you, and it is all day, every day. And that's why you hold on to it on a personal level. But somebody who's doing a lot of really amazing work, is Dr. Nadine Burke Harris, who I believe the Surgeon General. Yeah, she wrote a book called The Deepest Well: Overcoming Childhood Adversity, something like that. And she explains why it's hard to come out of things, why depression is so difficult to get out of on a scientific level. And the reason you hold on to all these negative things on a biological level is because your stress response system is whacked out of proportion. And it actually tells you all the time that you're in danger, which is important because when you were closer to an 8, you were in the wild and you were fending for yourself and you were doing all these really dangerous things all day long. You weren't sitting at home watching TV, relaxing. I don't know if there was much relaxing as a Neanderthal or a Homo sapien in the early days. And so these like external pressures are really just like, they're telling you, be on alert, be aware. So if you want to know why your brain's doing what it's doing, read that. And there's actually a whole cartoon based off of that, which is Steven Universe Future. And the Immaculate Steven Universe and its accompanying movie are probably like need to know, required viewing for anybody going through life, honestly. If you haven't seen it, go watch it.
I actually haven't, and I'll link that down below. I'll check it out and link it down below.
It's a kid's cartoon, for sure, 100%. But it's framed in the context of like alien species and hybrids and super intergalactic powers, and it's fun. But every episode touches on something, and I guarantee you, when you watch it, you'll be like, I didn't know I had a problem with that. Holy shit! And then like you're crying, and you're like, oh my god! And it's like positive reinforcement, constructive in terms of how you deal with it. And for me, I dealt with a lot of what Steven was going through because his mom was like an intergalactic warrior who like split the armies of this like intergalactic race. And I was like, and he's only hearing about him or her through other people's recounts of her, and he doesn't know her. So it's like being Chester Bennington's son in a lot of ways. I think I can relate to that. So the show is like really good. And in the movie, I was just like, my partner looked over and she's like, why are you like crying? Like, are you like sobbing? And I'm like, shut the, like you knew this was about codependency and you knew this was about, traumatic abandonment and things like that. And you're asking me if I'm crying. And like, yeah, because that's actually something that a lot of people, but I dealt with that, before my dad died. Lots of neglect and abandonment and all this stuff. So it's very, I think touching on those things is just fucking awesome. And the show's old. It's over. The whole thing's over. But it's really good to watch. So if you haven't seen it, Steven Universe. Don't watch the sing-along, annoying. But watch the movie without stuff and the bouncing ball and all that. And and then watch the companion show, which is him as an older kid trying to figure out how to be himself. Really. But yeah, I think overall a lot of the responses towards mental health awareness and just being constructive towards the future, I think it's really interesting to look at too, because it's really, I'm saying it now, I'm like, well, yeah, all these things exist, but really, like, Steven Universe, for example, has like 6 seasons plus a movie, so it's already been out for almost a decade. And, you know, The Leftovers is a couple years old and it has 3 seasons. And so it's almost, you know, it's well over half a decade old. So these things are not new. It's important to know that. It's not like people are suddenly realizing like, oh my God, these things are horrible. And like, we were blind the whole time. It's like, no, that's what institutionalization does to you. And that's what program does to you. It's always been there. And these authors have actually struggled to put this work on the screen or in the form of a novel or whatever, because there was resistance to those things. I mean, if you look at something like The Leftovers or like Watchmen, like Damon Lindelof is like famous for saying he's been working on this for 10 years now. Wow. And he said no originally because it was too much. He was like, this is too big of a responsibility. If you've ever read the book or seen the movie, you understand like the gravity of the content being put forward. He was like, I don't feel like responsible enough to put this out yet. And then he did. And he was like, I'm never doing it again. It's too much work. You know, so it's like, these people are actively they've been doing it for decades. It's just now we're at a position able to.
I think it's more easily available to see now, you know, we have the streaming services, we have YouTube, we have all these different ways to take this in, so it's a little bit easier to notice, to see, to get into. I think our only real big problem is, I mean, there's several mental health issues that we could work on, but I think the biggest one is everybody needs to have access to mental health care, be that through therapy, through a naturopath, whatever. There needs to be better access to mental health care.
I agree. I absolutely 100%. I think the bridge is being tapped by because I feel like on something like me, I wrote, for example, I just wrote this whole script, like a modern Western, and this guy, his brother died, and everybody's like, why aren't you caring more? And he's like, well, I knew what he was doing. I knew what kind of negativity he was propagating. I didn't want to be a part of it. And now that he's dead, like collapsing, and I'm trying to get away from it. And so I feel like I wrote that because it's my experience, but also because I don't have access to a therapist. I don't have access to those things. Like many people don't have access to those things. And so my goal is to write constructive and well thought out thesis on this one thing so that people can see it and be like, oh, that's weird. I totally would, resonate with it, and I think that that's really important. It's like these artists are saying things where they're like, well, that needs to be talked about. And then putting it either in a really subtle context, like something like Twin Peaks, or they're being very blunt about it and you're watching something like Watchmen or, Fargo, which is very like, I'm in your face. I mean, just even to touch on like Noah Hawley's work, like he did Legion, and Legion's all about mental illness. Yeah. It's all about it's amazing. And he wrote it as a superhero epic, and people were like, oh, but he's not killing enough bad guys. And he's like, that's not the point of the fucking show. Like, the whole point is that he thinks he's schizophrenic, and he's not.
Oh, God. People, man.
Yeah, it's crazy. And I think that's what's really nice about entertainment, and maybe the way it's evolved, because before it was just about entertainment. Yeah. It was about the gunfights. It was about these things. And, a lot of people don't know, but that's why Twin Peaks was started in the first place. Started out with the murder and brutal sexual assault of the prom queen, and the story went off on that. And the whole point of the fucking show was to show people like, this stuff is real. It happens every day. Pay attention to it. Don't look for closure in the sense of like, gunfights and, love triangles. It's not about that. You know, these are all results of the thing that's causing it. And this is what's causing it. And, you know, it didn't last very long, and then it came back like 3 years ago or so. But there are people out there who are trying to bridge the gap because they know people don't have access to these things. Exactly. Yeah. Both of us right now we're doing exactly that fucking thing. And it's so ubiquitous. It's so in front of our faces. And I'm sure there are hundreds of things, thousands of things being made right now that we just don't know about that are those things. I mean, Dune's coming out, and Dune's all about environmental awareness and climate change. So it's like they're turning these like really spectacular platforms into something that's has substance, is able to help people in a lot of ways see things differently than they've been taught to see them. And that is, again, I said therapeutic earlier. In my opinion, those are probably the most effective growing and being aware of things that I can't be aware of otherwise. Again, I don't do therapy. I can't afford a therapist. Especially now, like who's going to be able to get to one? You're not like, I have a friend who does therapy over, Skype with their psychiatrist, and you're just like, is it really helpful? Because I believe one of the roots of mental illness is lack of human connection. I don't know how you're getting the connection if you're not in a room with somebody.
You know, I will argue that one a little because I think that, I mean, I feel connected to you right now. I felt connected to your dad even though I never met him. And I've actually done like life coaching and stuff on Skype. And I think it's still helpful as long as you feel the connection, as long as you somehow feel the connection to the person. But if it's just, we are going to sit down and we are going, you know, I feel like it really depends on, number one, the professional, because I've sat in a room with somebody and felt completely alone. I've had therapists where I can sit there and I swear to God they're playing tic-tac-toe on the side of their sheet. Like, I just feel so disconnected from them. It's like, okay, you got your $200 worth. Can I just leave now and go, like, do whatever it is I was going to do that day? It's just, I think that there can be productive ways to do it online, and there are some alternatives for that. And I know most of the organizations and most of the therapy places are doing their stuff online, which is it ideal? No, but I mean, when we can't meet people in person because of COVID, Jamie, you know, we have to find, you know, ways to connect the best we can, and I feel connected right now.
I guess my only, maybe I misspoke about that because I'm thinking of the person I'm talking about, and I don't know if personal connection in a room would actually be any better. But I feel like it's hard to, I guess more of what I was trying to say, I agree with you, is like it depends on the person you're talking to, and it depends on the state you're in when you're doing it and what you're trying to achieve. For sure, 100%. And I mean, for me, I'm also just speaking on terms of like what I feel, and I'm a very like hands-on like person. I like being in the room with somebody. I like, you know, like for the script I just wrote, we had to do like a pitch meeting, and he's coming out here for a gig, and I was like, I'd rather wait 2 weeks to talk to you about any of this if I can just sit down with you and do it. That's just who I am. So, maybe
the timing of this, I would have preferred that with you too, but I kind of wanted to do this.
And I guess this is actually super constructive anyways, because even though we can't meet in person, because I'm personally very like, COVID, I'm staying inside. You know, there is the option to go in person, and this is helpful because I'm able to do this without leaving my house. So it's like, maybe, I don't know. I guess I just don't have a lot of experience with that. And me just being a physical person and just like being in like the vicinity of I feed off of energy a little bit. So, you know, for me, that's a little different, but yeah, I don't want to discourage anybody from getting help. I realize how that can seem counterproductive
here. I'm just playing devil's advocate a little bit. I
appreciate that.
Yeah. There were certain people that I have, you know, corresponded with during COVID. I have a couple of very close friends that we have seen each other and had dinner together. I'm sorry to say that we have, you know, corresponded, because there is a point where I'm like, I just need a hug. Please, I just need a hug. Someone to just hug me and stroke my hair.
I'm also talking from the perspective of somebody who lives with their partner and has the ability to go back to a healthy relationship whenever I need it, you know. So So I guess it's a bit biased. I didn't realize how biased that thought was until you brought that up. So I'm super happy that you did, because I see what you're saying. Yeah.
I think, like you said, I think it really does matter on the person. The reason I wanted to do this video now and not wait till we can meet in person, even though I'm very much going to have to come hug you at some point and cough on you when COVID's over, is the day that this video is releasing is going to be the 20th anniversary of Hybrid Theory. And I know you were a toddler when that released 20 years ago, and I feel so old right now saying that out loud because I was 16. Right. So nobody do the math right now, please. But did it inspire you in any way? Did you have any connection with the music as you grew up, like a lot of us did?
No, not at all. No, not at all, because a lot of people think I did. A lot of people don't know my history, and they just kind of go, well, like, oh, but you grew up in that family, so you know things. I'm like, oh, no, actually, I grew up in that family from the age of 8 and up, and I still don't know things. So it's like, it's very much the image I think that people get is that I am much more affluent, much more connected, much more able than I actually am. So it's weird. I grew up without my, actually. I grew up until I was 8 years old. I didn't know I had one. I remember it's like one of those classic situations where like somebody's asking in school, like, or talking about their dad, and then you're like, wait, a dad? What's that? I don't, I had a father figure, but he wasn't my dad, and I knew that. So it was odd. And I remember asking my mom and being like, hey, like, do I have a dad, or like, what's going on? And, she was like, well, yeah, you do. And, let me get back to you on that. And then, basically it was like, I think I was in a car. I think I was in the car with her, and she was just playing some music. We were driving somewhere, and she put him on. And then after the song, she was like, what do you think of that? And I was like, that's cool. Like, I don't know. I like his music, right? She's like, well, that's your dad. And I was like, oh, okay. So actually, I probably didn't hear, I think I heard Meteora first.
Oh, wow.
So I actually heard their second album. Oh my God, there's so many purists who are going to be like, you don't know what you're talking about. You said Meteora. I'm going to be like, oh God, whatever their second album. I heard that, one of the songs off that album first. I don't know which one it was. And that was
right after Hybrid Theory. I think it was Hybrid Theory, then Reanimation, which was a bunch of the remixes of the songs of Hybrid Theory. And hey, yes. I'm not a purist either, so I might be off there too. But...
Yeah, so maybe technically it would be the third, because I know that they did do a lot of stuff like that, and I think in a very specific way, the Jay-Z collab album is actually not considered a Linkin Park album.
Yeah.
So there are a couple of like mixtapes, if you will, or like little projects in the middle there that I don't know about necessarily, or don't know how to classify. But yeah, their second album was definitely the one that I heard first, and it was weird. And actually, as a kid, I didn't have any attachment to it, right? It wasn't weird because I was like, who are these guys? I was like 8. I was like, yeah, cool. Like, who cared? Kind of like, a kid. Like, I'm like, okay, well, I heard the song on the radio. And then she was like, well, that's your dad. Would you like to meet him? And I was like, sure. And, I actually met him, with the lip piercing, the short, shock blonde, fucking bleach hair. I think he had like small gauges at the time. They weren't as big as they would get. And then he had like a leather jacket and glasses. He still had glasses. He had the black frame glasses. And he immediately, like, the sweetest person. Like, he just like looked menacing, like had that new metal look, whatever that is. Because even at the time, new metal wasn't even a genre. So people were just like, is it metal or rap? And it's just like, it's fine, I think in a lot of ways we probably relate, me and my father, on an artistic level in that sense, because I mean, even the music I just put out, like, what is that? Who knows? And I don't think it fits in the genre, but with him coming into the music scene and being popular and being famous, like, the music they were doing was totally new. It wasn't, the genre didn't exist. And I think there were a few bands around that time that were also doing similar things. But it was just like uncharted territory. And I didn't know that at the time, obviously. I mean, hopefully you're not hearing this from the perspective of an 8-year-old, but I, met him and I remember my little brother, Isaiah being like, "Oh, you my dad too?" And then him being like, "Well, I can be." And then just like after that, it was like pretty much he just didn't change. So, that's my first memory of my dad. But yeah, I mean, 20 years ago, I would have been 4. I had no clue about anything. I was just a little kid eating rocks. So, that's not me being funny. That's a true fact. I ate rocks as a kid. Don't know why. Just really love the nature side of the world, I guess. But
I'm pretty sure I ate mud, so not
yeah,
too
it's not bad. It's actually kind of cool. I think that's just like I had a very tumultuous childhood, so, I think that's just a way of my body naturally being like, this is what's right. This is what's good for you. And that never left me either. So I'm a huge naturist. I love everything. I keep looking off because it's not because I'm thinking, it's because I'm watching the trees in front of my apartment. Like their leaves just.
As long as you're not eating the trees or still eating rocks, I think.
No. I'll rub dirt on myself.
Order for that. There are people that eat rocks and soap
yeah,
and I can't remember the name of the disorder, but that's a disorder. Yeah. Last question before we do this rapid fire round is, I know this might sound kind of silly, but when the hashtag Make Chester Proud became a thing after his passing, it became kind of a mantra for me. And when I met Mike back in 2018 in June, I realized, like, as Mike hugged me, I was kind of like, I'm hashtagging this with all my charity work, like, oh, look what I'm doing, but I was doing cocaine and self-harming, which was kind of like, that's not going to make Chester proud or my parents proud or really myself proud. So it's being a total hypocrite. So that was my moment where I'm now over 2 years in recovery from those things. So I did get off that, but I'm just curious what you think. I know that he'd be so proud of you. I think you're really doing great and carrying on his legacy and creating a name for yourself. But what do you think we can do to make Chester proud?
Well, we can stop saying it. I think it's become, it's like fuck depression. Like, yeah, it's really nice to say that, but like, what are you doing to make it not to show that you really don't like it? It's like, from my viewpoint and what I've experienced over the years, it's not much. And, it's actually probably like, I think the first like month or 2 was just like, oh my God, everybody's sick and everybody needs help and we should love everybody. And then all of a sudden it was like, ooh, but, I got other things to do and like job. I don't know. It's kind of a lot of like energy to put into something. And you're just like, okay, but like what? So you were just doing it because somebody famous died and that's it? That's weird. But I think too, like the hashtag Make Chester Proud is not bad. It's not a bad thing. I think things become different over time because different values are placed on them and the intention changes. And I think as of now, I will be honest, I don't go online and like check in on these things. I don't like see what good's being or anything like that. But from the people I've interacted with, they're not taking it the right way. Like it's not Make Chester Proud. It's like an anthem, like a Forever Chester or whatever. And you're like, it's empty. You're like, I don't know what that means because you don't actually have importance on it. If it was, you'd be not talking to me the way you're talking to me, not buying into the Samantha rhetoric or the John and Toby rhetoric. You wouldn't be on Twitter posting hate to my mother or anybody like that. You wouldn't be dragging the legacy of my now 8-year-old siblings through the mud when they can't defend themselves. It just becomes a different thing. Like, yeah, maybe you started out that way, but now it's kind of a different monster. And maybe I'm just seeing the negative side of it because that's the side that gravitates towards me because fans are toxic that way. But that is my experience. And if there is a different viewpoint or a different environment that I'm not seeing, then I'd be happy to see it. I just don't know where to look. So if anybody can point me in that direction,
I will send
sure
some
you
stuff.
can.
I do think that I agree with you 100%. I think it's kind of like the Black Lives Matter movement in a way that people have hijacked it. It's like the Me Too movement. I'm a sexual assault survivor, but these movements are getting hijacked where now people are like, I'm going to hold this drill and I'm going to take a picture real fast for my Instagram showing that I'm rebuilding this house that got destroyed during Black Lives Matter. Hashtag whatever. I completely agree with you. I hope that, God, I hope I come off that way. I really hope I come off that way.
5 signs or the Make Chester Proud hashtag hand thing. Like, I did that the first year because I meant it. And I didn't do that afterwards because I didn't feel like it mattered. All the people who posted, they don't follow up. They don't talk to me. They don't check on me to see how I'm doing. I get some people, like I probably have like 2 or 3 people that like regularly like insert themselves into my life and they're like, hey, how you doing? And I don't mean that in a negative. They're like, hey, like, you know, I'll forget because I don't see them for a long time. And I'm like, oh, who's this person talking to me? They sound like they know that they are talking to me, like they know me. And then I'll like scroll back and be, oh yeah, we talked about that. Okay. And it's cool. And it's a nice little relationship that we have. And, I'm thankful for it and grateful for it. Cause those are the people that truly do really care. You know, it's like the people who are actively thinking about it. I mean, I can't say anything about their personal lives. I don't know them that way, but at least what they're showing me is that they care. But 99% of those other people, like, where are they at? Cause I don't know. There was this really interesting idea of like, that we had, about 2 years in, cause it's the 3rd year since he's died, about 2 years after he died, we were like, let people associated with 320 who have really changed their lives. Like, let's go do that. That would be cool. Like, go around the world maybe and like talk to these people, do like a little like documentary kind of thing. And it didn't happen. It didn't happen. It didn't get enough traction. It wasn't popular enough. There was like a long moment where everybody was really excited about it. And then they were just kind of like, whoa, why? Like, these things don't make money or anything like that. And it just kind of became like, okay, but are you doing it for the money? Are you doing it because you want to help people? Are you trying to showcase the positivity in the world? Or are you trying to showcase the negativity? Because obviously, like, money's good. But if you're going around and you're showing people true change, that's better. Then, you know, I would gladly fly around the world on like the worst planes, like in the worst hotels. I'd sleep on the floor to go talk to these people and show people that change does happen and that it is actually based on yourself and not others. And just to see like what lengths people took that to. Did they go straight to their communities? Did they fix themselves for a couple of years and then go help a bunch of kids? What is that? Because that's what matters. It doesn't matter who's putting the fucking thing out. It just matters that it happened and that people can see that it happened and they can participate in it. Because that's ultimately what the conversation on mental health is. It's a conversation between everybody, and I don't think it stops at just asking questions. We talk about this all day, every day here at my house. If anybody's feeling a certain way, we put it out there. If anybody's struggling with something, they woke up and had a bad memory, or they woke up and just feel like shit or something, talk about it. We don't make them feel bad about it. And the conversation is continuous. Like, it's odd to me because I'll talk to my friends. I don't talk too often. I'll check in with them or something. And it's always like, oh, you want to talk about that? And it's like, yeah, I mean, it's a part of your life. Like, if you're telling me you're going to go get coffee today with a friend, I also want to know, like, what you guys are talking about. I want to know, like, you know, how your job's doing, because I want to know how people are treating you, and I want to know where you see yourself and what you're doing to help yourself. And, you know, maybe if I can get 30 minutes on the phone with you, which my phone calls are typically about this long. We're like an hour and it's just like, I'll just talk and because I don't feel that it is bad to give people that time. I don't feel like I need anywhere else. I don't feel like I need to be doing anything else. I just like, when I talk to people about it, that's what the true conversation is like sitting down and no matter how long it takes getting through that with somebody. And even if it means that you have to come back to it, that's fine. But I don't know how many people are doing that. It's really important.
I will actually say one of my favorite, I'll give you my favorite hashtag real fast, was there was a girl, I think she's actually here in the Valley or in California, and I'd had an experience like this, which is crazy, but she saw a guy that was about to jump off a bridge, and she went up and she started singing, I believe it was One More Light to him, and she had posted about it, it hit the news, and she hashtagged Make Chester Proud. I'm like, that is the kind of thing that's going to actually make a difference. I hope I hope it's something in me that you don't think I'm one of those people. At the time I was. When it first happened, I was like, yay, look at me doing more of it. While I'm snorting kind of cocaine. Please. That's not what would be making anyone proud, be it, Chester.
No, but that's what he wants. Like, if he were alive, he would want people to be able to do what he couldn't do for whatever reason. And there are many, many reasons he wasn't able to do this, is sit down and talk. He would have given anything to sit down and talk to people. I know that for a fact, because he kept certain people around for so long. The thing is that those people were just people instigating his worst thoughts and feelings, and then like making him believe certain things that weren't true. You're not an alcoholic. You should drink. Let's have a drink. You're just sad. And I'm sorry, but he had a drinking problem. You knew that because you instigated it, right? Like, a lot of people have friends like that where they sit down and they're like, oh, but I'm going through a really hard time in my relationship. I'm not really on the same page as my partner. I'm not it's hard. It's a lot for me. And they just kind of go, well, maybe you should just leave them then. It sounds like it's too much work. And you're like, but that's not what that is though. I'm not trying to leave. I'm just trying to figure out what works for me and why I feel this way, or trying to get to the root of it. And they're just like, well, the easiest solution is just to not do it. And that's what most of these conversations boil down to. And I use the partner thing because it's probably the most relatable, because most people who don't know they have depression or anxiety probably won't be able to tell. But they'll be able to tell if they've been in a relationship, which most people have, to some degree or another, whether it's a friend or a significant other or whatever. And even family, they'll be like, well, maybe you shouldn't do that. I remember being like, but I don't want to work a job. And it's not because I'm spoiled. It's because I don't care to work a normal job. I don't
either. No, thank you.
Why would I want to instigate the capitalism that's just tearing this country apart? Why would I want to participate in activities I don't believe in, just so I can live in a place that doesn't want me there?
I feel like in a way, having the 8 to 4 job is like selling your soul for a paycheck. Because I know for myself, I absolutely am not happy working an 8 to 4 job. I don't know a lot of people that are, but they're like, well, I need to pay the rent. I'm like, you know what? I paid my rent just fine as a single mom with a traditional job. If you're not living past your means, it's very possible.
It's very possible, and I think that's the most interesting thing. Is over here we practice accountability on a different level, because if you don't want to work the job, don't work the fucking job. You have to support yourself, and you have to be able to live the life that you're living, but make a life where you can live the one you want. I got fired from my job, like I told you earlier, because my boss was being cruel to the other employees. And I was like, you can't talk to me like that. You can't talk to these people like that. We can't do what you're asking us to do. You know that. You're setting us up for failure. I won't do that. And I'm going to do the job I'm hired to do, the one that's on my paycheck, before I do the ones that you're trying to get me to do, which are not, and also detrimental to the flow of the workplace. My boss is the kind of boss that would be like, we only have 2 people and we need you to do 4 jobs. And if you don't do them, I'm going to yell at you. And you're like, what can you talk about? And that's the kind of mentality though that a lot of people live by, is you always have to be doing something. You can't ever sit still and do nothing. You always have to be working. If you're not putting anything out, then you're not doing anything useful with your life. If you're not in a relationship, then you're not really thriving as a person, which is not true. You can be alone and be just fine. It's there are so many misunderstandings about the way the world works because of generations and generations of this programming. But it is that, and that's what it is. And you can live the life you want to live. You can do the things you want to do, and you don't have to do anything that anybody tells you to do. It's actually a choice. You're made to believe it's not, but you're allowed to say no. And I actually didn't get fired for that one moment. My boss hated me after that. And I'm never cruel when I say these things, but I'm honest. And it was actually when I got something that looked a lot like COVID that she fired me under the guise of like, well, you didn't do the leave of absence process. And I actually did. I did all of it. I have all the paperwork and everything, and she fired me. But she just did it because she didn't like me because I was telling her things she wanted to hear. And, I'm fine. I'm better off. All that shit that like was plaguing me, the bad work environment, the feeling horrible all the time, like weird hours, all this stuff, like it's gone. And I feel totally fine. I don't feel bad about it. And I think more people should live like that, and that's what mental health is understanding what's good for you, what's bad for you, and understanding that it is actually your choice. You are the change that you want to see in the world, and you need to be the change that you want to see in the world if you want to see others change. Um, Again, you put yourself in the box, you put yourself in the happiness. It's not easy. And it's not to say it's something as simple as a flip of a switch, because the thing about programming is you have to deprogram. And that's something I did recently in the last like year, I basically was like, I threw everything away that I didn't, that it wasn't even, not that I didn't want, but just I felt identified with me as who I was, and was just like, I'm going to go from a blank page and just be like, what do I really, and what do I really like? And
that's because the last module of the happiness boost course that I was telling you about, this last thing is cut the crap. Get the things out of your life, toxic people, the addictions, the things that aren't serving you. That is monumental to happiness. And people will stay in these toxic relationships or toxic friendships and don't let go, and then wonder, why am I miserable? I have a job I hate, a relationship with someone I can't stand, and that sucks up most of my life. What's left at the end of that? Of course you're not happy. Of course you're not happy. No.
I always love I have this thought a lot, and it's hard because you get into, if you're not careful, you slip back into that dark place, and that is, I didn't ask to be born. You didn't ask to be born. Nobody here asked to be here. Nobody called their parents up and was like, hey, can I like pop out of here for a second? And then like, I'll just come back here when I'm ready to go. Nobody says that. It's just like one day you wake up and then somebody's like, you gotta pay taxes. You gotta listen to your mom because she always knows what's right. You gotta, get a girlfriend because you can't be gay. You gotta like do all these things. It's like, okay, but how much of that do I do? Because I just told somebody close to me what works for me and how to be healthy, and described how a relationship wasn't working out. And I'm not saying anybody specific here. I say it to my friends, I say it to my family, and all this stuff. And it's amazing which people will be like, you're right. That was bad. Yeah, you're right. This is not healthy. We should probably change that. And the people that go, I don't even know what I'm talking about. And that's crazy to say because it can be people like your dad. It can be people like your cousins or your sisters or your brothers, or it can be your best friend. One day you just tell them, hey, I didn't like that you did this. And they're like, get the fuck over it. And you're like, what? But that's not what this is. And then you realize like, oh wait, I don't have to live that life. I don't have to be here. And I think, and I don't think I know most of the time the reason it's difficult to get to this point of life and living is the fact that you don't want to let go because maybe you don't know what that other thing looks like, and you don't know if it really exists because you haven't experienced it. So you go, I'm going to hang out with this friend that treats me like shit because that's the only friend I know. And since it's the only thing I know, it's got to be the only thing that exists, right? It's the proverbial cave metaphor that I think it was Plato put out, where he's like, you live in the cave your entire life, you see the fire and the shadows on the walls, you think that's all you got. And then you realize, oh, there's an exit to this cave, and the world is actually infinitely bigger and more complex and more wholesome than that cave. It's kind of what it's like. And there's a lot to be said about how difficult that process is and how much support you might need. It depends on the person. So, make Chester proud. That's what that is. Everything I just said is what that should be. But I'm not sure a lot of people understand that. And, there's also a level too of like, how accountable can somebody be for something they don't know about? I always thought it was, my family's really, they're really big Christians. Some of them are like traditional Baptists and whatnot. I'm not religious at all. I'm more of like a spiritualist. I believe in like energy in the universe and all this stuff. I don't believe in God, but or at least what is canonically known as God in the Christian tradition. But there's always this funny part where like humans are just set up for failure all the time. And it's really interesting. If you look into it, you start to see the pattern of like, well, God knew who we were and what we would do because he knows all things and everything that could ever happen. And somehow we're the bad guys for being sinners because he made the devil and then he made us and he knew those things were going to end up wrong. And then now we go to hell forever. That's weird. And every time I ask questions, it's always like, well, but that's just the way it is. We're not meant to understand it. It's like, I think we're meant to think about this shit a little bit more critically. But then there's also the even funnier, moment where the apostle comes over and he's like, do you know about Jesus Christ? And he's like, the poor guy's like, no, I don't know. And he's like, well, you do now. And since you know, now you're a Christian. And if you don't accept God, then you go to hell. And he's like, why did you tell me? Are you telling me I could have lived in peace forever? And you just walk up and tell me, hey, do you know what God is? And I say no, and now I'm stuck in the fucking curse of Christianity. That's cruel and unusual punishment. It's also a setup for failure. And I think that's the way people typically see the life of the forgiven. It's like, well, I was born, and now that I was born, I have to do these things. And if I don't, then I'm not acceptable in the eyes of people. And I'm not acceptable in the society. When the fact of the matter is like, no, that was something done to you. And once you realize that it was done to you, you actually do have the ability to get out of it. And it's not your choice of whether you want to be there and living in that life that you know is just sucking the life out of you, or you can live a healthy, wholesome life on your own terms, the way you want to do it. And that's totally up to you. You just got to do the work. And some people are actually in deeper holes than others. But, but pain is relative, and the things that set you off are not the things that are going to set everybody off. I don't mind loud voices. I don't mind people yelling at me because I had a loud dad. He wasn't loud because he was mean. My dad screamed for a living. Like, he was just a loud guy. I mean, my partner and my friends always have that issue with how loud I am. And I'm not being aggressive. I'm just loud, just a loud person. I'm being quiet right now because I don't know if my upstairs neighbors are annoyed with me yet. But I'm sitting on the porch, and I don't know who's over this. But but like, those things don't set me off. I grew up in a household where people were just loud. And so yelling does not trigger me into a depressive state, but gaslighting does. Or like, when somebody's like, calling names, that will set me off. And some people don't mind being called names. They're so sure in their identity, it doesn't bother them. So, pain is theoretically relative based on your stress response, and your stress response system can actually be out of whack from the most simple things. People who are rich have anxiety. People who never knew poverty feel like they're the poorest people in the world. They don't even think they have friends. They don't think there's anything worthy about them. And that's not true at all. And, so it doesn't matter context, really. You can always count on the fact that your pain is actually yours and yours alone, and you don't need to explain it to anybody else. And, there are some people who are definitely worse off from the start and who definitely get worse off over time. But, it's always a choice to recognize it and then choose to not be in it. So, that's what Make Chester proud means. It's what it should mean. Actually, it probably shouldn't even be associated with one person. It should probably just be make yourself proud. Maybe that is a better hashtag. Because ultimately it's just you.
I think there's a part of us, though, that connects to we always connect to someone. We always look up to someone as kind of that inspiration. For me, for the longest time, I used to really love Elle Woods. My Chalini's not in here right now. I've had Chihuahuas and stuff, but I always looked up to Elle Woods, and all of the work she did for animals. And I'm a vegan, and I'm really big on animal rights. And then it was Chester and all the stuff he did for mental health and spreading that awareness and message. And I dearly hope that I can, make Elle proud, make Chester proud, make my parents proud, make myself proud. I just think that whatever it is that you utilize as your inspiration to get to the point of making yourself proud is what really matters. But I am 100%, I love your answer, because I absolutely cannot stand all those people that are posting all about Chester, just people that'll post and be like, oh, look what I did. They're saying I do this charity, maybe consider giving to this charity, or hey, I'm doing this and this is really important to me. Look, at this work that needs to be done. But then there's look at me holding a drill, pretending that I'm doing this, or look at me hashtagging Make Chester Proud because I was listening to Hybrid Theory last night. It's like, bruh, I listen to Hybrid Theory all the time in my car, but I don't think that's what's going to be making Chester proud. You know what I'm saying?
And I totally agree with that. There's always you have to have a reference for, there's a platform to enter on, and it's usually a person or a project, right? I mean, like I said earlier, my music stemmed from Alex Turner and David Bowie. I always say Alex Turner is my soul, my spiritual animal, as a joke. But no, for real, there's a level of I'm me and that's it. And you have to deal with that. Even David Bowie, I mean, look at David Bowie as a person, as an actor, as a musician. He's an excellent entering point of okay, well, how did this person do it? So I can maybe try to do it myself. Yeah. And I totally agree. The thing is you can't say that and then totally ruin everything that totally speak opposite of what that person was actually about. Don't tarnish their name because you want to look cool. And that's it.
That's the equivalent of saying, hey, Black Lives Matter, and now I'm going to go refuse service to an African American. Yeah. I don't think that means what you think it means.
There were some people who were, I listened in on some of the classes that my partner goes through because she's a student right now, and some of the people are always like, well, I did my part. I painted rocks that say BLM, and I have embroidered pillows, and I'm like, yeah, okay, but how many of you actually went out and stood on the corner? I didn't. I'm not saying I did, but my retaliation, my rectification, my method of it is different. Mine is just, well, I make things, so I'm going to make things. I don't like going out to corners, especially during a pandemic, but I support everybody who does it, and I will have the conversations I need to with the people I need to about those things, and about racism, about, sexism, about all these kinds of things. It doesn't matter. I'll do it in my way. But to jump onto a fad just to do it. And that's what you said, it gets hijacked. And that's what I feel like the hashtag is hijacked. Because it's not exactly what it was. That's false. It could be. And actually, like I said, it should probably even be changed to make yourself proud. Because I think that gives power to people, because I think what happens is a lot of people attach power to an image, and then they're like, oh, well, Chester gives me the power. And then they're still stuck in the same spot of well, but Chester isn't giving you the power. He's the person who suffered so that you could see what suffering is, but he's not the person that is getting you through it. You're getting you through it. And I think that's the biggest misconception is the intention and placement of that power is well, you gotta think about it though. Are you doing it because Chester told you to, or are you doing it because you want to do it? It's the same thing being in a relationship. Are you in a relationship because whatever it is, whether it's intimate with a significant other or a friend or a family member, are you in it because you be in it and you cherish that relationship and that helps you be more of who you are? Or are you in it because you were told that you should have friends, you should have family? Or are you in it because you were told that, you should be in love all the time? Not realizing that that's totally dangerous no matter how you spin it. All of those are dangerous no matter how you spin it. So think about it. I want people to think critically about the things that they're doing, because they're not always doing it. They think they are. And that's the trick, right? That's the trick of the stigma. The trick of the programming is that it convinces you that you are paying attention when you're actually not really paying too much attention at all.
So while we're wrapping up here, we got the rapid fire questions. So rule is you only have 5 seconds to answer first thing that comes to your mind, okay?
Okay, easy.
Okay. Is there a movie that changed your life?
Mulholland Drive.
What is your favorite video game?
Probably Halo. All the Halos.
What superpower do you wish you had?
I don't know. Flying? That'd be cool.
That's flying. I just want to fly.
I'm trying to think of the practicality of that, and I don't think actually flying would be very good. There's lots of bugs and inclement weather. Maybe being able to shrink. Shrinking would be fun. I don't know.
That would have long-lasting benefits, you know, of being around.
I'd shrink down to the quantum level and try to have a conversation with the universe. I become so small, I become non-existent.
I was gonna say, what is ayahuasca? That's how people have conversations with the universe.
Oh yeah, ayahuasca, peyote, psilocybin mushrooms, you name it.
There's your superpower, please. I'm not advocating anybody do those things, but
it's kind of therapeutic. I'm not saying do it irresponsibly, but maybe like take a look at it. I don't know. They're tools. So for anybody who's trying to safely explore those options, keep in mind that it is spiritual, it is intellectual. You're not doing it for the sake of being high or drunk. You're doing it because it teaches you about yourself. And you need to be open to that when you go into it. Otherwise, you're going to freak the fuck out.
I think that's amazing advice. I have to ask, next question, favorite Linkin Park song?
Oh, God. It was Leave Out All the Rest, and then he told us that he wrote it for us, and then now he's dead, so it's a little bitter. But that was a really good one, and probably any of the Transformers songs because they just make the movies good-ish, and the movies are horrible. So
they really were. That was the only redeeming thing.
I don't remember why they ever chose to do it, and I remember my dad coming home like, I saw like a preview. Michael Bay let me into the editing bay. It was the sickest thing I've ever seen. And I remember watching it and being like, as a kid, like, whoa. And then like as an adult, I'm like, what was that? That was so crazy. That was such like a.
Favorite go-to comfort food?
Comfort food. Sweets. I have a big sweet tooth. I'll just straight eat white chocolate chips or anything out of the bag that we get for like pancakes or whatever. It's kind of a problem. I get yelled at for it.
That's funny. I actually have a dark chocolate affinity, so I feel you on that one.
Any chocolate. Especially since I discovered GoPuff. It's like, it's a true challenge to not just get whatever I want. Like, I don't have the money for it. So it's not like, but I do it anyways. Maybe that's my addiction is sugar. I think that's true. I don't know how I don't have diabetes.
I was gonna say, you look really good to be eating chocolate chips all day.
No, I do. It's horrible. I honestly thought I had diabetes at one point, and I don't. And pretty much anybody who knows me is like, how the fuck?
I actually be really careful because if I eat too much, I'll get like anxiety and panic attacks. I really have to monitor.
Oh, really? Yeah.
I've actually noticed with a lot of my clients, that's actually a fairly common thing, is sugar intake will affect your like,
it throws off your chemical balance, which is why it feels good.
Yeah. And it does have the same effect as cocaine, but it also will screw up your gut and sends the signals from the vagus nerve up into the brain. So yeah, sugar can be damaging.
Yeah, it can be really bad. I think it's all intention too. I mean, you can literally repair your DNA with meditation. I know that's like a crazy thing to throw at you, but you can do it. Yeah. You just have to meditate. So, and that's actually in the deepest well. So if you just read the book, but it's true. I've meditated for almost 3 years now. I am not. It's a different level of existence. Just be mindful. It's really crazy.
Mindfulness is actually the number one thing. I was diagnosed borderline personality when I had my SMI, and mindfulness is actually the number one treatment for borderline personality disorder, because if you can't be mindful and you can't think to use your skills, you're not going to flourish. You're never going to be able to cope with your disorder. And that's actually, I found true for depression in general. Like, that's why I actually created a free workbook for people that's how to improve your focus to boost your happiness. Because if you can't focus and you can't be mindful,
it's miserable.
I'll link that down below. But there's no way that you're ever going to really live a fulfilling life if you're just sitting here doing this all day on Instagram.
Well, and the thing is too, it's like a lot of people like to knock new age people, which I agree they're a bit extreme, but I don't believe in like Poseidon. He's talking to me from a different dimensional vibration. I don't believe that, but I do believe in vibration. I do believe in the power of sound and frequency. I believe in science. And meditation has actually brought me closer to that, and even closer. And I think it's funny when people like, well, David Lynch is just a weird spiritualist. No, he's like a scientist. I don't know if anybody looks at him like that, but they should. He's really an incredible thinker, and the reason is that you actually do control vast amounts of your life from a quantum level. A lot of people don't realize this, but like you actually do have an effect on everything that you do and everything you see and how it affects the environment around you. Which is why a lot of meditation, especially like chakra meditation, they make you visualize things. It's because you're focusing. It's exactly about focus and focusing your intent and your energy so strongly that you're manipulating these biological processes and through that manipulating the literal environment around you. I think anybody who does meditation, like they overall can like calm an environment. It's a mental thing. It's magic. It is magic. It's what people would typically think is magic, of as magic. And it's funny. Everybody's like, oh, they're just crazy wizard people. They don't even, it's not real. No, it is real. It's just, we use different words. Like people might say source instead of God, or they might say synchronicity instead of miracle. They're roughly the same. They have different intentions though. And when you go to something like Christianity, for example, the intention is more on the manifest destiny side of things and not about the wholesome, integrated sense of the world, which is more healthy, I think. I think seeing yourself as part of the greater whole instead of something so important, it's not a part of the whole, and then you're separate and there's a whole that bows to your will is a bit more detrimental, even just from the intention standpoint, because your intention has everything to do with how you feel, how you interact, your biological, your mental, all of it. It's all tied to the science of intention, which is focusing energy, which you do have and you generate all the time. It's why you can feel shit when you walk into a room. You're like, oh, this person's mad, something's going on. Or like, oh, hey, are you having a bad day? You can become essentially empathic to those things. And it's not magic. I said it's magic, but I'm saying that so that you understand what it is. It's not, Wingardium Leviosa. It's mind over matter. It's, and it is different.
I love you so much more right now just for making a Harry Potter reference.
I love it. It's great.
I think though, when you stop to think about it, like it kind of is, because I can't tell you the crazy shit I've manifested. I mean, this conversation right here, anybody that knows me, the fact that me and you are having this conversation is a result of some pretty crazy energetic manifesting I've been doing. But yeah. I'm back in like 2015, this was an accidental manifestation. But I was doing a lot of visualizing, a lot of meditation, a lot of hypnotherapy, and I decided, this was when I started realizing, I don't want this job I have. I'm not happy in this position. I want to do something else. I want to travel. And I kind of laid out, here's all the things I wanted. And I very vividly remember I had envisioned this Parisian cafe, like this cafe in Paris that I wanted to be just sipping tea and eating my crepes. And I ended up at that exact freaking cafe.
Same one. It's
never
real.
seen in my life, never saw a picture of, but it's like I envisioned this cafe, I wound up at this cafe, I'm like, holy crap.
My relationship with my partner is something that we both independently manifested from different places in our lives. It's kind of crazy, like all the things around it too. A chant was tied into that. All of my work since then has been tied into it, because this is the life that I'm talking about. This entire thing I'm talking about is supported by this person. And so the manifestation is real. If you really, that's why you get things. It's not, there's a saying about being poor versus poverty. And like, if you're in poverty, poor is a mindset. You will always be poor, but poverty is a very real circumstantial thing that you can get yourself out of. And a lot of people who get money, for example, might tend to have poor tendencies, poor practices, because they think that they're poor and they're not. It's all about intention and perspective. And so when you go into these things, you're like, okay, well, what do I really want? And I wanted somebody that wasn't going to be negatively impacting my life, somebody that was going to understand this mentality, this philosophy, this practice. And it took about 3 years. I was a wildland firefighter for a hot second. To pay for the movie. I did the movie. I met some really great friends. Now I'm doing more film with those people. Like, synchronicity is very, very real. It's an important coincidence, something that's not just random. It's Jungian. I forget how to say his name, but Carl Jung is a philosopher. His Red Book is fucking phenomenal. He worked with Sigmund Freud, who actually perpetuated sexism and all these negative coding, social coding things. he broke away from him after 6 years of working with him and was like, this shit's wrong. I know that this is all wrong. I'm going to figure.
Freak.
Yeah, he was. But he was also like the epitome of like that way of living and that way of thinking. He was exactly that. And Carl saw his way out. He was like, I'm going to go do this. His red book is literally a book of synchronicity, premonition. It was so, spooky. He predicted World War I, for example. Spooky that it wasn't even released until a couple of years ago, and he's been dead for a couple decades now. And he wrote it in like the 50s and 60s. So, or sorry, not even then. Sorry, like 1913. It was old. It's been over 100 years since he wrote it. If I have my facts correct, I believe I do. But he wrote this. He actively wrote down these practices in a book, and recontextualized like a whole category of his work to fit that book, because he was like, I thought I was seeing this, but actually it was this. And it's real. It's real fucking spooky. I'm actually, and I know it's like weird to say this out loud, but since we're talking about mental illness, you know, there's nothing really weirder, but I do have premonitions. I am empathic. I do have abilities to like manifest things, you know, but it's not unusual. I think that's the thing that's super scary, is like people act like you're some crazy demon person because you have like the devil in you because you can see the future. But it's like, it's intention. It's practice. Everybody actually can do it. And I think a lot of people do it and they don't know they're doing it.
Okay, that was me. Like, I did it accidentally. It's funny because, number one, I'm a fan of Lucifer, so I'm totally fine with having the devil in me. It's fine.
Yeah,
Number two, I actually, when I was a little kid, I was younger than 8 actually. I think I was like 5 or 6 years old. I went to my dad and was like, your friend's gonna die. And his friend died the next day. And I had this growing up, like I had premonitions a lot until people started being like, well, that's not normal. You're not really.
Yeah, and then, well, you shut yourself off from it.
I did. I shut myself off from it. I didn't know that my parents were going to pass. Like, I didn't know what was going to happen, but I got a really bad gut instinct, and I knew that something epically bad was going to happen in my life. I think we got sidetracked from our 5 second. I think.
Totally. But I think that's super important to everything that I've said so far too. Is, you know, even my comment on shrinking down to non-existence. That's like, yeah, that's, you know, that's tied to it as well. But these are also natural aspects of people's lives they might consider a mental illness.
And it's not.
They're not.
It's totally normal. There's a difference. I will say there's a difference between having premonitions and having visual hallucinations. So
absolutely. But like with all of mine, like the difference is like, okay, what's the difference between deja vu and premonition? Deja vu, you can't trace back. You just walk in somewhere, you're like, oh, this is odd. I've seen this corner before. I don't know what this is. And then you can't think back and go, oh, did I have a dream? With a premonition, you dream it weeks, months in advance, and then it happens exactly the way it happened. My song, Paper Moon on Then actually recounts a premonition I had where I predicted the death of my younger sister. And I thought it was just a bad dream, and I held on to it. My mind just kept going like, you gotta tell somebody. I was like, fucking come on. It's a nightmare. Like, get over it. Then I finally called my mom and I was like, you know, Lily's gonna die in the water. She's gonna be playing around. She's not gonna think that it's, anything dangerous, and nobody's gonna be watching her. Whoever's supposed to be watching her, she doesn't take seriously, and she's just gonna do it anyways. And they're probably not paying attention. And she was like, whoa, that's crazy. You know, like, basically went into this whole thing that justified the entire dream, and then she didn't let them go to this pool party we're going to the next day. And they're still alive. And these things happen, like when my grandfather died, I had a dream that I had things growing out of him. And that day, actually, was diagnosed with inoperable tumors, and he didn't tell anybody, and he was dead in a couple months. So, you know, like, it's real. None of this is like, it's not all intention, because the intention shapes what your result is. So if you're going into it with negative intention, with the idea to harm, you also get that out. It's a machine. It's a computer. It just does what you tell it to do. So if you're negative, you're going to get negative back. If you're positive, you're going to get positive back. And depending on how negative or positive you tend to be or can actually manage to be, you get different results based on that. So it's really important to the idea of mental health, because I'm also talking about things like that, where it's like, That's real, and that really could have killed me if she actually died. Like, those are things that you shouldn't be hiding. They're not scary.
It's also important because I think I know that we can use those tools in healing ourselves from these like ailments and stuff. I was diagnosed with a serious mental illness. They told me I would never, ever, ever live a functional, happy life, that I would never be certified, that being decertified just wasn't a thing that's not possible. Guess what I freaking did this year? I got decertified. Yeah. And a lot of that was energy work. It was changing my lifestyle. It was making different decisions, and I was definitely in that mindset where I thought depression is not heal. Depression is kind of a thing that you can heal. I'll always have, or anxiety. I'll always be different. And it's very much something that you can heal to a very, very strong degree.
Everything that we've been talking about, even though it seems it goes off on tangents, which it does, and it's spiraling and winding, they all relate back to the same thing. It is incredibly good to be mindful of these things, because you're right. I suffered from depression for most of my life. I didn't know I was. And the second that I started peeling back the layers and healing from those circumstantial things that happened to me to cause that, and coming to peace with it, it kind of disappeared.
Yeah.
And now I'm not saying it's not serious. I'm not saying it's not real. What I'm saying is like your intention and the work you put into it does matter.
I think something that's crazy powerful that I didn't necessarily realize till we were having this conversation is, I always say, Lincoln Park got me through this, or Chester got me through this, or whatever. And while yes, it empowered me to get through it, like it helped me get through it, it took him passing away, and I wish that it hadn't taken this, obviously, but when he passed away, I fell into this darkness because I didn't know how to cope, but at the end of the day, I had to find myself. I had to understand my parents were not around, Chester wasn't around, I didn't have any of those security blankets or any of those other people. Yeah. It was now me. It was on me to heal, me to find my own voice, my own coping mechanisms, my own whatever. It was on me. And
sometimes it takes hitting rock bottom. Sometimes you don't have to get to rock bottom. Sometimes you're just born that way and you just know.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, well, so the struggle for you is keeping that. It's not finding it, right?
Yeah.
And there's no one way to do anything. There's no specific way to go through anything, especially grief. And, I think it's interesting because I think the more, we look into it in terms of research, in terms of medicine, disease, physical, mental, disorders, they all stem truly from the way in which we process the things that we go through and our intention behind those memories. That's not to say be delusional and be like, well, my intention is that my life is good, and so like my abusive relationship is like really nice. Don't do that. Right. No, the intention behind it is to be honest. Not good, not to keep things safe. It's to be honest, and there is a certain amount of fear, free-falling fear in honesty. But you know what? I think you'll find that most people are really good at flying. Yeah. I think that's a good way of saying it, because really, when you come to the understanding that you are in control of yourself and you do have say in how you feel and how you respond, that's what meditation teaches you. Your feelings are just environmental inputs that come right out, and you react to it the way your natural instinct, your animal instinct tells you to. It's not who you are. Your thoughts, you cannot control. You will always have them. You will always be flooded with them. You see something, you think, well, that's white, or that's black, or, oh, I'm mad, or, oh, that pissed me off, or, oh, I'm hungry. And you can choose whether or not you want to be mad because you're hungry, or you can choose to go eat, or you can go, oh yeah, that color, it's pretty cool. Okay, I don't want it anymore. I don't care. It's just a color.
Onto things, like learning to say, okay, that's a thought. I actually named my different kind of, I don't want to say personality, that makes me sound
yeah,
like,
you should. I talk to myself.
Yeah.
I have a personality that talks to me.
Yeah. When you address them like that, and you're like, okay, Shadow, you know what? Thank you, but I don't need that right now. And taking control of your thoughts, because, well, not even taking control, just understanding they're a thought. Okay, acknowledge, let it go. You don't have
all of these things are telling you something. It's your interpretation of what that feeling is that's telling you it's negative, but it doesn't have to be. Right? So like, even though you are panicking, and even though you are maybe having multiple personalities, like, I believe that there is something to be learned there, right? It's interesting that you said shadow because that's actually a Jungian philosophy as well. Do you know about him? The guy with the philosophy?
I actually just named my kind of dark after my shadow.
He calls it shadow work, and what it is uncovering the parts of yourself that you don't know. And it's not bad, it's not positive, it's not negative or positive, it just is, and you put your intention onto it, and that makes it negative or positive. And it's just exploring yourself. Maybe the part of you that, likes having a lot of sex is not bad. Maybe that's just telling you something about the way that you're doing. Maybe the part of you that likes doing drugs isn't bad. Maybe it's telling you something about yourself. I mean, obviously the habits themselves can be bad, but it's your interpretation of what that is and what you're willing to do to understand it.
I think in a lot of times, like, my shadow was trying to protect me, and I saw that, like, she would do things.
Exactly.
And just be like, just do the line. Coke, you'll feel better, because she didn't want me to hurt. It's not that
exactly.
What are
you hurting, and why is that there? It's telling you something that hurt you, and you can take it as like I need to cover it up, and I need to feel better. Or you can go, well, why did that hurt me? How did that happen? And how do I avoid that? In a constructive way, not like all men are evil kind of thing, or all women are, bitches or whatever. It's not as general. It's just like, it's so funny to me that you're telling me these things because we just binge watched The United States of Terror, which if you've ever seen, it deals with multiple identities, not multiple identity disorder, but DID, which is what it was reformed to. And Toni Collette is so beautiful in that because she touches on all these different reasons why certain things happen. And she's not faking. Like, it's real. This is not a gimmick. It's not something that's like, oh, I'm just, not wanting to deal with it. It's not that at all. It's protected, right? And I like the way that you described that. And I obviously don't want to impose any thoughts that are incorrect or like make any grand assumptions about the condition that you suffer from or have suffered from. But, it's teaching you something. And I think that's something the show did really well, was describe the characters themselves, the personalities, and then also be like, hey, like, maybe there's a reason that you turn into a man that's protective of you, who will kick anybody's ass. Maybe that's a really good thing. And, it has its negative aspects, but like, it doesn't make you a bad person. And that's just the way you are handling it. There's nothing wrong with that. And, the show unfortunately didn't. It was before the era of accepting shows that are honest. So it got canceled real fast, but, Toni Collette, I don't know if you've ever seen it, but she's so fucking good.
I'm actually not a big movie person. I don't watch a lot of movies or shows for the most part.
I come from a world where that's all I do. So, no, it's really interesting, and they tried really hard to break that stigma and to explain it and to do like a really good job of like not making her a bad person, but making it understandable on like a really digestible level. And I was really sad to see it end because it seemed like they might have had a dispute at the end of the show where the network was like, it needs to be this, and they were like, but that's not what it is. Like, it needs to be more accessible, and it's like, but it's not accessible. It's a condition that's really difficult to deal with, and like, it's gonna be ugly. Like, we're not gonna pussyfoot around that. And it seemed like they kind of had, it wasn't time for that show to happen.
That's always tragic when that happens. There was a show that I loved when I was a kid, and it was a cowboy western show, and you've probably never ever heard of it because nobody ever has, but it's called The Adventures of Briscoe County Jr., and it was where Bruce Campbell got his start, and it was just a show that was way, way before its time. Like, that's the only crime it had. It was a great show. It was just way before its time. So
I
it's always
think Evil Dead is like even Ash versus Evil Dead, or even any of the Evil Dead movies, they're perfect. They are totally digestible, and they totally are accessible. But Bruce, like, he knows what he's doing, and the movies, even though they're campy horror and they got blood, guts, they got dicks, whatever, it doesn't matter. Like, it's really fun, but it's also very serious, and like, you kind of get the fact that like, it is a show about accepting the darkness in your life and deciding what to do with it. And Ash doesn't do it, but his daughter does. And, like, there's a lot of really interesting commentary on mental illness and how it affects people. And, I think it was taken lightly. Like, I think people were just kind of like, oh, he's so funny. Like, oh, look, did you see that gag this episode?
I saw
And
it.
it's like,
I didn't watch Evil Dead when it was a thing, but I went back and watched it. And I watched the series, and I'm sitting there going, yeah, I see all these underlying mental health things. Lucifer, actually, that's why I got into Lucifer, is because the idea of having to hide your devil face and having to hide this part of yourself that you don't like, that in itself destroyed me. I mean, it doesn't hurt that Tom Ellis is really good looking. That's obviously a perk. Yeah. But, like, the underlying mental health story there of, you know, having to hide part of yourself and hating a part of yourself that you feel like you have no control over. I bawled so hard after several episodes of that show. There was one where he was telling the therapist, like, why he hated himself, and I just started sobbing, and my partner's sitting there
you're like, wow, that was really
we're watching Lucifer. Are you okay there? Yeah. Like, can you rewind to Tom Ellis's abs real fast?
You need a hug? Yeah. Well, there's a really interesting, when they took on Ash versus Evil Dead, Bruce Campbell gave an interesting interview where he didn't actually talk about the slapstick aspects of the franchise. What he said was, I see Ash as a veteran. He's a war survivor, and he has PTSD. And he deals with a lot of this stuff, and nobody cares. And I thought that was a very interesting take, because he's not talking about how funny it is. He's not talking about, oh, well, we're back, baby. He's like, no, Ash is like a real character with real problems, and he's childish because he can't move past what he's been through. He doesn't have that support.
The only person that had that. I thought I was the only person that looked Evil Dead and saw it that way. So I'm so happy.
I actually loved the show so much that when it was canceled, I wrote a 200-page script that I didn't finish. That is a bridge between the cinematic and the TV worlds of what he went through in the movies and what he went through in the show, and then what happened in the standalone movie that they did with Rocket. But the composer's Rocket Lyons. He's great. But with, oh my God, I can't remember his name. He's really great. Let's see. It's I'm so close. Fede Alvarez just did such a good job. I mean, the whole movie is about addiction and dealing with these problems. And I wrote a 200-page script bridging those two worlds and like the continuities, and basically explained like all the continuity errors and the entire franchise. And then like went through and like continued the story of the show and brought this character back into it, because they like raid hell, and like hell's destroying itself, which is ironic in a lot of ways, and I thought a really cool metaphor. But they find her at the bottom of the pit and they bring her out, and she's dealing with another level of trauma that hasn't been experienced before. And the whole thing is about dealing with trauma. And I saw it always as a trauma story, and I wrote this massive epic story about how they all independently deal with the trauma, and how like the differences in aesthetic between the show and the movie are actually results of people dealing with things in different ways. And it was interesting because I made a big point on the classic story of Dante's Inferno. I like made a big old like allegory to that. Yeah, and well, the irony is, right, this is where the manifestation comes in. As soon as I finished the script, point where I just come back and later, which is 200 pages, Fede Alvarez actually posted on his Twitter the levels of production and what was the most hellish to the most enjoyable, and they were all described using the levels of Dante's Inferno. And I was like, well, then that just shows you that I was fucking right? Like, it was something that was just so, it spoke to me so clearly, and I just, I think these people have always been here, they just haven't been seen in the way that they were meant to be seen.
I think that they used to kind of have to slip it in on the DL, instead of having, here's a movie about mental health, so we're gonna have this zombie movie.
It's a war-torn veteran dealing with like the evil army. Like, no, I don't want to watch that. They're gonna be like, no, we want to see like Ash with his boomstick with his head up someone's asshole, literally. Like, they want to see that, and it is funny, but it's not the point. But okay, so we're almost at 3 hours. I know I just keep going on. So,
I think we have 2 questions left. Two of the rapid fire. So one was, what is your hidden talent?
Oh, probably philosophy. I don't think people think that I'm as philosophically sound as I love philosophy, and I love all these things. I think really critically, and I think a lot of the things I do incite people to believe that I'm just whimsical, and I'm not. There's a purpose behind all of it.
I think you're very philosophical, but I feel like I could sit here and talk to you all day for a multitude of reasons.
That's what I was saying. I was like, I told you I could go on forever.
I'm like, everybody's gonna love this video, man. What skill do you wish you had, but you will probably never acquire?
Can it be an emotional skill?
Yes.
I wish I didn't get jealous. I wish I had an ability to stave off jealousy. I find myself getting jealous about stupid shit, and then just like, you're like, okay. Like, I have massive FOMO. I don't know, I know why, but it's just hard. Like, it's hard. I just, if I'm not involved, I feel like I'm hated. And it's a weird thing where it's like, it's not true. And then obviously that there are other aspects of jealousy too we could talk about it forever. But, I think I realized recently that I have like kind of like a jealousy issue. It's not negatively impacting my life, but if I could not deal with it, or if I could if I could get to a point where I can naturally work through it without succumbing to the negative side of it, I think that would be a wonderful talent to have that I don't have. I find it kind of throws a wrench in everything.
Here I'm sitting over here going, I wish I could speak lots of different languages, but I only have 2. That would be my skill. And here you're like, I just wish I didn't get jealous. I'm like,
I want to be emotional. My skill is emotional.
Emotional control. That is all the questions for today. Jamie, thank you so much. I think you've given so much amazing value to people that might be struggling with this. Guys, if you are struggling, please, please, please know that you're not alone. I'm going to link, number 1, Jamie, thank you so much for giving me a long list of all your favorite books and movies that I'm going to have to go through here. But I will all of that below so you guys can check out any of those. I'm also going to link the resources to the Suicide Hotline and some other resources if you're struggling. But if all else fails, you can reach out to me. You can reach out to Jamie. Know that you're not alone. Find a group. Do something. But guys, share down below in the comments what your personal story is with mental health. Let's keep this conversation going. Let's keep this...
Even the things that you resonated highly with. Like, just let everybody know what you're, talk about it. That's the whole point, right? So just let us know what your thoughts are and whether something resonated or you have something else to add to something that we talked about, because there are always more things to talk about.
Definitely always more things. I feel like we'll probably have several more conversations that we will post.
I mean, 3 hours seems kind of short.
Why not have a whole entire, Jamie and Amanda show where we can just...
Well, I mean, that would certainly fix the problem.
But thank you guys so much for watching this, for supporting us. Make sure that you subscribe, like, and share if you think someone else could contribute to this conversation, whether, like we said, agreeing, disagreeing, or sharing your own stories of depression. Thank you guys so much, and thank you, Jamie. You have no idea how much this meant to me.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for not, thanks for almost sitting through 3 hours of this.